Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a good one. Andy, how are you? How are you doing? She's like, I'm doing fine as long as you give me a treat because you told me to get up here just now. Hang on one sec. There you go. There you go. She still hasn't had her second meal for the day. So hopefully Mr. Bites will be home soon and can give that to her because I completely ran out of time. Sorry, I'm a little bit late again. This happens often, but I always try to make it on time. Today's just a super busy Monday. So anyway, so I'm like, I haven't had had food myself. So, which by the way, I made chicken tortilla soup for the first time ever. And I'm really, really proud of myself. This stuff is pretty good. Okay. Totally random aside. We're getting further into the Menendez trial. I'm so excited because we are getting further into the defense case in chief now, which is what I've heard where things get more and more interesting, more and more spicy. So let's go on. Let's get into it, right? But I do want to say, I noticed in the chat we've got some newcomers here. I mean, we've got some people that have been here for a while. Debbie Face on Cook, good morning. Aaron Morgan, whoop whoop for Menendez Mondays, because yeah, it's another Menendez Monday. And Otterly Bell, hey Alita in chat, good afternoon, with some Lima Fire emojis. But we've also got some newcomers. Christian Williams, hello from Washington, D.C. I'm new here. Glad to be here for the first time seeing a live. Wonderful. Welcome. And Chelsea with an A. Hiya, friends. I just spent the week binging Menendez Mondays on 1.75 speed to get caught up. So I'm happy to be here. That's awesome. I love that. You know, when we have a long series, you never know, like, what the retention rate is going to be, if anyone new is ever going to come in, because it's like, especially one like this, that's just such a long series. I mean, this is episode 22. And we started off with 2-hour episodes, but I've been expanding that ever since because I just, it's taking a long time to get through this trial. So anyway, so it's cool to see some new folks in the chat, and welcome. And if you are not in the chat, but you are new, or if you've been here for a while, welcome just the same. I love it. So today we are now going to meet one of the Menendez cousins. I just updated this. What is his name? This is Brian Andersen Jr. So for the folks in the chat that are very familiar with this case, you guys will be able to enlighten us with little tidbits in the chat, I'm sure, which is always like a fun little part of this is like, if you guys, if you're watching and you haven't been paying attention to the chat at all, oftentimes we've got some people that are giving some really good backstories because they are familiar not only with what actually has transpired in this case, in this trial, but also the second trial, and a lot of background information because there are so many books that have been written, and podcasts and documentaries and all kinds of stuff about this case, and for good reason, right? It's a huge case. I just recently saw a court TV video where they were actually talking to Mark Garagos, who's the appellate attorney for the Menendez brothers, who is they're trying to get a new trial, or at the very least, or either a new trial or have this verdict overturned and vacated entirely so that they can be freed and, rejoin society. I saw an interview with him because there's been a lot about this letter that Erik wrote to one of his cousins. I don't think it was this cousin. It was a different one. Anyway, that it was a letter that was not introduced to trial. And there's also the allegation that just came out from one of the members of the boy band Menudo. Both of those are connected to the allegation that Jose Menendez was abusing the Menendez brothers and also other people, including the former member of Menudo. So it's interesting. It was an interesting interview that I saw. I still don't think that this letter is likely to overcome the hurdles that it needs to overcome in order to get what the Menendez brothers want out of it. But there were some interesting arguments that were still put forward nonetheless. Anyway, but they also mentioned in this clip that like one of the people from Court TV was like, yeah, like people often think that it was the O.J. Simpson trial that put Court TV on the map, but it was actually this one. Like this is the first one. And of course we know that, right? Because we know that we're living in 1993 in this case, and the O.J. Simpson trial has not yet happened. I think Nicole Brown Simpson was probably still alive during this trial. So anyhow, so this is going to be interesting. I think that all of today is probably going to be this cousin. But I'm sure there's going to be some really interesting detail because we're going to be hearing probably a lot of tea about the Menendez family in general. So let's get into it, right? I am yammering just a little bit too much here. And I've even talked long enough that Indy she's back to Sleepy Town. Okay. All right, enough of that. All right, let's go.
Courtroom television have that individual.
Let me know if the volume balance is okay.
Right. And what is the matter here that counsel want to discuss outside the presence of the jury?
On the interview notes of Alan Andersen, it's a 3-page report dated April 27th.
Yes.
And that, with respect to my first objection, counsel has indicated she will not use that particular reference. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as to the second one, she will not use. The third one, she is going to elicit specifics about the consequences to the brothers. As to the fourth objection,
And I
she will
apologize.
not use the
I
first
thought I had this
sentence.
queued up for testimony. I do not.
That issue. Yeah, therefore.
Okay, let's find it here because
Issue
normally
for doing those.
the status bar on the
Or
video
margin.
gives me a good indication of like where things are going to start, and this one does not. So
Show.
wow, we're gonna get right through some evidentiary arguments here. Oh, I think yeah. Okay, we passed it.
Proceed with the trial. Both sides ready with the jury? All right, let's get the jury out, please.
Here we go.
In the trial, the juries are both present, and we'll resume with the testimony. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you. The defense calls Alan Andersen.
All right, is he here? All right, step forward, please, and stand behind the court reporter. Face the court clerk over here. Raise your right hand.
So we swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Please. Would you tell me your full name and spell your last name?
Brian A. Andersen Jr., Andersen.
Mr. Anderson, are you related to Lyle and Erik Menendez?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Before the
first cousin.
Matrix, Mr.
Can you
Anderson.
look at our family tree up there and see if you can find yourself?
Brian and Pat, Alan and Tim.
So that's a me. Charles is
Yes, Charles and May Anderson, yes.
We have a family tree now.
Ryan is your father.
Brian is my father, which was Kitty's brother.
And Pat is your mother.
Yes,
Okay.
So Kitty and Jose Menendez were your aunts and uncles, is that correct?
correct.
How
Okay,
old are
so
you?
he's on the kitty side.
31.
Is it accurate
Got
to
a fun
say that
tying
you
it
are
today.
6 years older than Lyle and 9 years older than Erik?
I believe it's 6 and 8 years.
And did you have the occasion to be around the Menendez family over a period of time as Lyle and Erik were growing up?
Yes, I did.
And what is your earliest memory with regard to where you saw them? And if you want to identify them by the houses.
Well, the earliest that I remember is if you have a picture of the Hinsdale home.
Your Honor, may I mark as 148, a chart of the Menendez family homes starting with Wexford Terrace, and is 149, a chart of the Menendez family homes starting with Pennington, New Jersey.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, is it easier for you to refer to timeframes by the houses they were in rather than by specific dates?
Yes, it is.
And when you remember them being in the Hinsdale house, would that have been approximately 1970 to 1972?
That was just after Erik was born.
And the family was together, I take it? Kitty and Jose and Lyle were all living in that house?
Yes.
Would you go over and visit there occasionally?
Yes, we would. We would just go over there as a family unit, my father, mother, brother, and myself. And we would socialize with Kitty and Jose and the boys, or the adults would socialize and the boys would play. The boys and myself, my brother.
And while you were visiting during that period of time, I take it that Erik would have been less than 2 years old, is that correct?
Correct.
And showing you a picture, which I would now like to mark as 150. And Your Honor, I have enlargements, and on the back I have an envelope with the original photograph. They are attached, so may I use one number, or did you want sub-numbers?
They're all of the same.
Yes,
Thing.
the original small photograph is here, and the enlargement is on the front.
With the idea that the small would be the duplicate for the purpose of the jury.
Or it's just partly for authenticity, so they can see what the original photograph looks like.
Well, I don't see any need for that purpose at all, if that's the only purpose.
We can use the small one for the duplicate.
All right, then both will be marked as Exhibit 150.
Mr. Anderson is showing you a photograph which we've now marked as 150. I ask if you recognize that,
That's the Hinsdale home.
okay? And would the Hinsdale home be the one shown in the photograph?
Oh, no, they had a circle sidewalk, as you see there, that I'm walking up into their home.
So the Hinsdale home would be on,
That's someone sitting on the front porch taking that picture,
do you recognize the person in the front yard?
if I may. That looks like Lyle.
And do you know who lived in the house that is pictured?
The house that is pictured.
Were Terry and Carl?
Terry and Carlos's home, I believe, is this one back over in here. Like there was across with the field divided the subdivision. There was a center plot of land, and it was just beginning to be under development. It was mostly all prairie at the time. And then there was the street. The street came in and then horseshoed around, so that it left a big open field in the center.
Okay. Now, during the time that they were living in the Hinsdale home, did anything unusual occur with regard to Erik leaving the home and going to his aunt's house?
Yes, it was quite unusual to myself because as the adults were preoccupied with themselves, both boys would be able to, and my brother and I made it up as they would be able to escape out of the home, and Erik would then
That's a
cross
word
the
to
street,
use.
get in the field,
He would escape from the
and then my
home.
brother and I would realize where they were, and I would go over and have to run on the field and chase Erik and bring him back to the home. Because his purpose of doing was to go over to the girls, his cousins of Terry and Carlos.
To your knowledge, did this happen on a fairly frequent
Oh,
basis?
fairly, very frequently. It was almost a joke at how easily he could get out of the home.
Okay, and he was less than 2 at the time, is that correct?
He was walking, yes.
Now, when you would return him to the home, did his parents seem to be concerned about the fact that he was out
They would
crossing the
laugh.
street?
Okay, wait until she finishes the question before you answer. You can't get them both down at the same time, okay?
I'm sorry.
Okay. What was
A
the
little nervous
reaction
as a
of
witness.
Kitty and Jose Menendez with regard to their son crossing the street and going over into that field?
They would be jovial, more of a joke.
After the Menendez family left the Hinsdale home, did you see them again?
Not for some time.
Did you eventually go and spend several summers with them?
Yes, I did.
And do you know the dates of the summers you spent with them?
The dates, no, but I know the homes. I know the 3 different homes that I stayed in with them.
Okay. Can you find the homes on the chart? Assuming we have them all.
The Cedar Grove home that had a long driveway in it. I remember that home. I remember the Hinsdale home. I remember the Muncie home. I also remember the Princeton Junction home. Princeton Junction home, well, yeah, those are the 4 homes I remember.
And the Princeton Junction home they lived in from 1977 to 1978. Do you know if you were there in 77 or 78?
I was there in 77.
And was that your last visit?
Yes,
And in 1977, you would have been 16 years old,
correct.
and Lyle would have been about 9, and
9.
Erik would have been about 6.
Yes.
During the period of time that you were around Erik and Lyle Menendez, were you able to make certain observations in terms of their personality, what type of people they were?
In which regards, the 77 home, to which area of a home are we talking about?
Did it change over time?
Yes.
Let's do the early, well, you said you remember Cedar Grove, that would have been before Erik was born.
Right.
And Hinsdale, he was very small. So let's start with Muncie. Did you spend summers with him in the Muncie house?
Yes, ma'am, I did. I spent two separate summers in the Muncie home.
And during that period of time, can you describe for me just generally the personalities of the 2 boys?
The first,
Objection big as a time, can you specify?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
We're talking about the 2 summers in Muncie. Do you know specifically the years? Did one of the summers you spend partly in Muncie and partly in Princeton Junction?
well, Muncie would be 75,
Thank you,
and
Shereen.
73, I believe. Yes, 73. And you got to excuse me, Your Honor. I'm dates are not very well with me. 75 was for sure because I was in 8th grade at the time. And then I went after 75, 77. 75, 77 because I helped them move to the Princeton Junction home.
Okay, so we know for sure 1975, we know for sure 1977, and you're saying possibly 1973?
No,
Or-
70. No, I had to get my bearings straight as far as where I
Okay.
was in school.
Okay. If we're looking at the period 1975 to 1977, were the boys pretty much the same during that period of time, or did they change?
With Lyle,
Mary Maiden, he does look very nervous.
things were somewhat the same. With Erik, though, I noticed a drastic difference.
Okay. And can you describe Lyle for me, since he was the same both times?
Lyle was like myself. I was a quite rebellious child. I just was inquisitive. I like to go investigate. I like to do things. Lyle at that time was not allowed to leave the yard. And I found that kind of strange that the neighborhood was off a busy street. The neighbors were all kind, especially the one friend that I befriended while there.
Okay.
Okay, wait for another question.
And with regard to Erik, now, did you see a change between 1975 and 1977?
He became much quieter, became more introverted.
During the times you lived in these various homes, and I'm going to direct your attention particularly to the Muncie, Princeton Junction times, which would be 75 and 77.
Mhm.
Did you see or hear fights between Kitty and Jose?
I heard, I never saw.
Okay. Now, was this just once in a while? Or was
No, oh no, this was frequent. Most of the time it would be late at night or after we've gone to bed where they would have woken me because of where my bedroom was and their bedroom was. Although the doors were closed, for the level of their voice, I could hear them. It would probably wake me up.
Okay, when you talk about the level of the voice,
Jose's voice was a lot louder than Kitty's. Kitty's would be in a defensive type tone to Jose's being more direct.
could you hear words or just loud noises?
Kitty was, in some cases, I did hear, yes, conversations. Kitty was concerned as to.
Well, wait, let's not do that.
Sorry.
You could hear words. Could you
Yeah.
hear other things? Could you hear crying or throwing things or hitting people?
At times, I did hear Kitty crying.
And did you ever see bruises on her?
Yes, I did.
And are there any occasions which you can remember in which you could identify those bruises as having happened during one of those fights?
Yes, I can, because the one morning after I heard that they woke me up, Kitty had a bruise on her bicep and also had a bruise up the upper collarbone at the base of her neck.
Did she have it when you went to bed that
No.
night? Were there some unusual rules with regard to the food that you were served at dinner?
Well, in which detail would you like me to go into with that?
Well, what happened if you didn't finish the food on your plate?
You got it for breakfast or lunch the next day?
And did that happen to Erik and Lyle as well?
Yes, it did.
Would you describe for me, and again, we're focusing on the 75, 77 period, if it's the same for both. Would you describe for me what the atmosphere was at the dinner table?
It was very much of like a Jeopardy setting in regards to Jose drilling the kids with questions of the day and only of that day.
What do you mean questions of the day?
Well, it would be to where newspaper articles, such as certain encyclopedias, different events that happened throughout the day, and an answer was needed quickly. You had to have an answer. You had to have an answer.
That sounds
And
so
I found that
stressful.
kind of strange because
Jefferson. is there-
All right, you have answered the
Now,
question.
the last visit that you had there, Lyle was 9 and Erik was 6. Is that
Correct.
correct? And were both of them expected to participate in this Jeopardy type of questioning?
more so Lyle than Erik.
And what would happen if you didn't know the answer?
The paper was on the dining on the coffee table, or encyclopedia was on the shelf, and you were instructed to please put your fork and knife down and go find the answer, or bring the paper to the table to receive where the answer was.
And did you participate sometimes in the
I
questioning?
tried to the best of my ability. I was not an avid reader, and I was unable to comprehend where this was coming from when I first started being subjected to this.
And if you didn't know the answer, was that okay?
No,
What happened if you didn't?
I was belittled. I was belittled by Jose.
And were the boys similarly belittled if they didn't?
Lyle more than Erik.
When they had to put their knife and fork down and go look it up, would Jose make any comment about the time that it took for them to find the answers?
That was extremely very strange to myself. May I go into detail on that?
Or just tell me about what you saw happen.
If they took more than what Jose knew it took for them to walk to the area, it was money to him. He made it seem like it was money lost to him.
Now, how did he make it seem like it was?
Objection, Your Honor. I move to strike the speculation.
No, it was considered.
Okay, you have to wait and just wait.
Mr. Anderson?
There's an objection there, and
I'm sorry.
they're actually not talking to you when they do that. They're talking to me.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Poor
And
guy.
also, again, if you could just have a pause after the question is asked so that, number one, it gives the lawyer a chance to object if they want to
So
object.
nervous, this
And it
witness.
also gives the reporter a break
And
so that the
understandable.
reporter can distinguish
Everything that he's
between the
talked
question
about so
and the
far.
answer.
He's talked
because she's
about
taken down every
Jose
word.
physically abusing
Yes,
Kitty.
ma'am.
He's talked about
Right, the objection is
stress
sustained,
of
the
the
answer is stricken.
boys growing up
Did you
at the dinner
hear
table.
him make
These are interesting
comments
details.
with regard to the importance of the time that was wasted in looking these things up?
He would directly look at the boys or myself and say, "You've lost $5 from me right now."
Where did the money figure come from? Did he
It was,
explain?
it was because of the fact that he was trying to groom the boys of the corporate level. And money was time. Time was money.
And is that what he explained to the boys?
Yes.
Now, in addition to, was dinner a fun time in the house?
No, it was very tense. I did not enjoy digesting my food at the dinner table.
Were there,
Excuse me. I did.
I did not enjoy digesting my food at the dinner table.
were there other times when you observed Jose having conversations individually with one or the other of the brothers?
They would have a one-on-one session.
Okay, now what do you mean by, first, they? Who would have a one-on-one session?
It would be Jose with independently each one of the boys.
And can you describe to me what these one-on-one sessions were like?
Well, like after dinner, if answers weren't given properly, they would sit in chairs across from each other, and Jose would be leaning forward, staring correctly at the boys, and to receive their attention, it would be a look like this close.
Indicating approximately 4 inches, Your Honor?
4 or 5 inches.
Yes.
I mean, it would keep them from being able to wander and look at other things, but Jose talking with them. And I used to back away, and as I backed away, they used to come forward, and the boys would try to sit back in the chairs, and Jose would make them sit so they could confront and talk about what the wrong answers were.
So they would sit leaning forward in these
Yes.
chairs. You said the chairs were facing each other. How close were the chairs?
Their knees were 2 inches apart.
Now, is this something that was unusual or something that happened on a regular basis?
This happened only when there was a frequent misanswering of constant questions.
And would there be other times in which you would see one-on-one conversations between Jose and one of the brothers?
Only during discipline, or if they were going to go play tennis, what he expected of them during that practice.
Okay. And would that take place in the same type of physical setting that you've described?
Yes.
And how long would these talks last?
Anywhere from 5 minutes, as I've seen a few asked a half hour. Those are half hour long, half hour, sorry.
And how did the boys look during these sessions?
Extremely tense, unwilling to want to be where they're at.
Were you,
Objection, I would strike that answer.
All right, the first portion of the answer, extremely tense, would remain,
You're
and
gonna
the
strike
balance
the
of the
rest
answer
of the
is stricken as a conclusion.
Okay.
thank
The
you.
jury heard it anyway.
Were you disciplined by Kitty and Jose during the time that you lived there?
Yes, I was.
And what type of discipline did you receive?
Verbal.
And what do you mean by that?
And hang on, I am so sorry. I did not do this before, but I see in the chat some folks getting impacted by this. Should have given a trigger warning. I didn't realize he was going to get this far into it, but then as we got into it, I also missed that opportunity. We are talking about abuse. We're talking about the physical abuse, emotional abuse. I am sure other forms of abuse are going to be coming up very soon. So if that is difficult for you, do what you need to do for yourself, for your own mental health, your own emotional health. There's absolutely no need to put any of that on yourself that is going to impact you in a very, very negative way. Trigger warning. There are some difficult themes that we are encountering here, and he's getting into a lot of detail about these things, which is important because we've heard from other witnesses talking about how Jose Menendez was very tough on his sons, right? Like he was always on them. He was always present during their tennis matches, all of this stuff. And so, but we didn't really see any sort of like real details other than like him being very, very watchful on like what they were doing and kind of getting this vague impression of like, oh, he was a very tough father. This is painting a very vivid picture of someone who is very abusive. I mean, not just towards his wife, according to what the witness is saying, that when she went to bed, there were no bruises, but then he heard them get into a fight. And then the next morning she had a bruise on her bicep and on her collarbone. So either she was strangled or hit in the neck, and I'm laughing because it's just insane, not because I think it's funny, just so you know. But like, there's a lot of detail here, and it's very important for this case to go into it so that the jury understands the situation in which these brothers grew up in, because it's important to the defense, because it's part of their overall argument that this is self-defense. These are people who have been abused over time. They think that they are going to be continued to be abused by this person if they do not act. So this is a very important step. But all of that said, if this is triggering for you, take care of your mental health, do what you need to do, take a step away, walk outside, see some sunshine if there is sunshine available, like do something that you need to do to put yourself into a good place. Okay. And I will not take any of that personally at all, because you got to do what you got to do. All right. All that said, let's continue.
Either one of the two, Jose or Kitty, would raise their voice to a level of where I would be like, yes, 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 I won't do that, I won't do that. And then I would be sent to my room and the door would be locked.
Now, how long would you be left in your room?
For hours at a time, and at times I'd been left in there overnight.
Were you allowed to come out?
When I had to go to the bathroom, I would knock at the door, and I would start off with a soft knock, and I got no response, so my knocks would get harder, and no one would respond. And
So
as a little boy, I as a 12-year-old kid, I looked at the garbage can, I looked at the window, and there were times I opened the window and I peed out the window.
Wow.
Were the boys sent to their room for punishment?
Yes,
also?
ma'am.
And were they similarly not allowed to come out?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you ever physically disciplined by either Kitty or Jose?
Never Kitty. Jose, I would not accept Jose's face-to-face talks, and I would back up from him, and he would grab me by the arm, which he had immense hands, and once she grabbed you, you did not try to pull away, because his strength was unbelievable, and he would just grab you and it would just keep squeezing. As the more you pulled away, the tighter his grip got, and you could tell him you were getting hurt because you were not listening to him. He didn't care. So then you learned if he grabbed you because you backed away from him, that you just stand still, and then he would not get in your face, but he would accept the fact that he was within arm reach of me.
Would you have bruises afterwards?
Yes, I would have his immense handprint on my upper bicep.
Jeez.
And how often did that happen to you?
Only when he got into my face.
How often was that? Are we talking about once or twice or 10 times, or do you have a range?
I'd say between 6 and 10 times.
And did you ever see him grab the boys similarly?
When they did not want, yes, I did.
And when would that be?
When they did not want to go to their room, he would take them and would grab them by the biceps and would forcibly take them down the hall to put them in their room.
And what would their reaction be?
Oh, that they did not want. Their feet would be lifted off the floor. They did not want to be doing this because they wanted to spend time with me watching TV.
Were you ever disciplined with a belt?
I was threatened, but never, I personally was never touched, but Jose,
Objection, he's answered the question.
okay,
Objection sustained.
Were the boys ever disciplined with a belt?
yes.
And can you tell me how you know that?
Because I was, at that time, we were disciplined at sometimes together or separate instances. And I was either told in separate instances to stay in the front room to watch the TV. Kitty at that time would turn the TV up. Or at times when I was in the same room, where our rooms were side by side, you could hear you can hear the belt, because I also received when I was a child.
And would you see bruises on the
Yes.
boys after that?
Yes, and they're above their thigh area for where a belt would be hit.
Would be the upper thigh area?
Upper thigh, lower buttocks area.
Is this something that happened once or more than once?
I would have to say 12 to 15 times.
And would you hear anything from them, or did the TV block?
I would
that?
hear cries, and then I would hear Jose's voice level raise, and then I would hear silence.
What kind of sounds?
Silence the boys, just stop crying.
Were the boys sent to their room as punishment also sometimes?
Yes, and also their doors were locked.
Now,
Their door, they only had, they both shared the same one.
when they were sent to their room, what was it, you go to your room for 10 minutes, or is it a set
Oh,
period
no.
of time?
Oh, no. There was never a short-term discipline as far as being locked in your room. There was always long-term, 1 hour minimum, day maximum.
And did you have occasion to help them clean their room one time?
Oh, yes. I'm a very meticulous person, so I would take it upon myself to try to educate that with them.
Did they share a room?
Yes, they did.
And was there a time when in cleaning the room you found something unusual?
I found a Tupperware container under the bed,
And what was in the Tupperware container?
feces remnants.
When let me go back to the belt. There was one other question on that. Would Jose do anything with his belt other than hitting people, which was intimidating?
Well, yes. When he came home, he would sit in his chair and have his paper, and Kitty would then come in and fill him with the day's events, or prior to that would have called him on the phone to prepare him for when he got home. He would just take his belt off and lay it on the couch, or at times he would, when you take a belt and you snap it to get your attention, and would lay it on the coffee table.
And did that have any particular significance or meaning to you?
Someone was going to be disciplined.
Would you know why?
At that point, no, because I would then try to filter back into the day what happened that Kitty may have gotten upset about.
The discipline that you received or that you saw the boys receive, was it for things that it was obvious you were going to get in trouble for that? Or were
Repeat the
they?
question, please.
Yeah. When you would either get disciplined or see the boys disciplined, would it be for behavior that you knew was going to really make somebody mad?
Well, no, I consider it normal childhood behavior, normal things that we would do.
Do you have children yourself?
Yes, ma'am.
How many?
2 girls.
Would Kitty try to intercede and protect the boys in situations like this?
Not all the time. It all depends on Jose's reaction to the crime, I guess, if you want to say it. It all depended on how he was going to, towards Lyle. He was always more physical with Lyle than he was Erik. And Kitty would always be more for defense of Erik than he would, and she would always leave Lyle out in the wings to accept whatever would happen. And she would always be there for Erik.
And what about Kitty? Did she have a temper?
Oh, immensely. I'm sorry.
And did you have opportunities to observe her get mad?
Oh, yes. She had this.
Wait a second. How often did that happen? Would it be once a day, once a week, once a month, once a year?
Once a week for sure.
Okay. Now, was there anything unusual about her behavior when she got mad?
If I may, I'd like to show you her parents that let me know she was about to fly off the handle. Is that
Can you stand up and demonstrate?
she would be standing in an area, spacing on an area, and thinking about what, and all of a sudden she would just turn her fist up and
So you'd
then
clench
she
it?
would squint. Her teeth, her lips would go straight. She had perfect teeth, so you can see her teeth would just come
So she
out.
would relive
The
some
veins in her
memories.
neck would pop, and her fists would be and then clenched, where her knuckles would be white from clenching her fists. And at first, I didn't know what to accept of that. And then as I lived there, I realized what that was, what that appearance of her was about to happen with, what was about to happen.
What was about to happen?
On numerous occasions, and this happened every week in the Muncie home. She would, in the kitchen, would open a cupboard and start taking coffee cups, coffee saucers, breakfast bowls, these are glass items, and repeatedly throwing them in the sink and breaking glass in the sink. And at the end of that, then I would walk in because I'd be in the other room around the corner watching TV or in the general area. It would get my attention immediately. I would run in the kitchen and go, Kitty, which would snap her out of whatever she was into. There were times that also she would not snap out of it. She would just repeatedly keep doing this until either she was satisfied or that role of wherever she was emptied.
And when this happened, how did it make you feel? Was it a frightening
It
experience?
was very
or stunning,
frightening.
or-
Also, it made me very concerned. I just didn't know what to make of it. I tried to ask her what was the problem. She would not talk to me. She would just right away direct my attention to getting the broom and the dustpan and the vacuum cleaner so the mess was cleaned up before Jose got home.
And what was the reaction of the boys to this behavior?
Normal.
What do
This
you
seemed
mean?
very normal, which they didn't get extremely excited, like I did, which I found to be very strange in my own way.
And would there be times when she would get angry rather than throwing the dishes, when she would get angry and express her anger directly to you or to either of the boys?
She would do that fist clenching, face tensioning thing, which whenever that would happen, I would jokingly look at Lyle and say, "Oh man, here we go. Something's going to happen now." Or what did you do? Or what, I'm trying to think, what did I do? And then she would just fill us verbally with what her problem was with us as far as raising her voice and yelling at us.
And how long would it go on?
Until she had to say what she had to say, which could be anywhere from a minute to sometimes 5-10 minutes.
And was it frightening to watch?
Yes, extremely, because especially towards Erik, being as young as he was.
All right, let's take our break. It's about 6 minutes after the hour, and
Wow.
we'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final
There's a
opinions
lot
about it,
going on
and we'll
here.
resume at 1:30.
I mean,
So, counsel,
there's
has a matter
indications
or two
of
that you
abuse
wanted
going on
to
that he hasn't
deal
seen,
with
but
outside
that
the
is
jury's
being
presence. If you
relived
want to have that
by
done
Kitty
now, we
when she's by
can.
herself in the kitchen. Like, this is
Yes.
a lot.
Mr. Andersen, was there an incident while you were living in Muncie in which Lyle came to you and asked you to protect him from Jose?
Yes.
And was there a particular situation that you remember that had something to do with Kitty lying?
Yes,
Could you describe it for us?
sure. I was in the garage and I was down there smoking a cigarette at a very young age. I started smoking. Lyle then came in through the door from the basement and he looked sad. He was very puzzled. And he was wanting to know why whenever we did anything as cousin to cousin, why the severity of the punishment was always more for them than for me when the crime was the same for all three of us. He was very confused. He wanted to know why. At that age of myself, I couldn't give him an answer. I didn't know what made his father tick. I didn't know.
Okay, and did he ask you to do something on his behalf?
He asked me to please talk with his father. I told him at that time that I just couldn't.
There's no
I
reason.
couldn't. I said, we'll talk to Kitty.
Was there a situation in which something happened and Kitty lied about it and Lyle got the blame?
Well, we were in the backyard, and there was more than one instance that I can
Okay.
remember.
So there were a number of situations where she would lie about something that would have happened and Lyle got punished for something that wasn't his fault?
The things that I did that Lyle had no part of, maybe by standing there, or he wasn't even in the area, would be Kitty's telling Jose that he did it.
And then would Lyle get punished for that?
Yes. Oh, yes. And I would have nothing would be said to me at all.
Oh my God.
That's it with that particular incident, Your Honor.
All right, did you wish to examine on those?
I have one other incident. I didn't know if you wanted me to do both of them or just,
Oh, I thought you had completed.
well, that there were two areas you wanted officer approved.
Okay,
You
go
want me
ahead
to
with
do
the
both?
other. Go ahead with the other, and then,
With regard to a description of Lyle's emotional condition, you had told me before that he was on the verge of breaking and talked about whether he had control over his emotions or what type of control he exerted. Do you remember that?
Lyle did the best he could to not.
Objection, this is speculation.
well, it's not responsive. She just asked, do you remember something of that nature? You
What
can
do
say
you
yes or
mean?
no.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. What do you remember observing in that area with regard to that type of behavior?
When Lyle would talk to me in a cousin to cousin conversation, in his conversation, in his tone of voice, he would start out very calm and direct as to what he wanted to say. But as the conversation grew on, he would start weakening to the point of where he would start stuttering at times, wanting to cry. And what he would hold, his eyes would water, but they would not, the tears would not go down his cheek. It would just wipe away. But then again, he would then gather his composure and continue then with the questioning as far as wanting me to help him, as far as talking with his father, that I, at that point, flat out refused.
And this idea that he was holding his emotions in check, was it just this one incident? Or
Oh, no, not at all. No, on separate occasions that when the discipline should have been equal amongst all three or just him and myself, it got more towards the boys, and I was sent to my room, door locked. And then you could hear the boys being punished in their room with either severity of me hearing them with the belt or his father yelling at them. And then you would hear that door slam. And then you know that Jose was done once the door was slammed.
Were
Okay,
there,
again, that has nothing to do with the question she was asking about referring to Lyle Menendez and his dealing with emotions or holding his emotions in. That's what she was asking.
so were there a number of incidents that you observed without going into the incident?
Whenever we talked, yes, whenever we talked.
On any one subject or others?
No, only about the way that there was no equality in the way we were disciplined.
How many times did you have such a conversation?
That I know of 4.
And each time his demeanor was the same?
Yes, he would start out very calm, direct, and then it would grow into him holding his back, his emotions.
Were there rules in that family about whether you were allowed to cry or not?
Emotion was something you did not show. It showed a sign of weakness. Jose made that very adamant, even to myself, because I am, and I'm an emotional guy. Although how big I am, I do have emotion. I'm not afraid to show that emotion. I had to go out in the backyard at times and just show my emotion to myself so that the Kitty and Jose would not see this emotion.
Right, the question had to do with crying and whether there was any house rule regarding crying.
Yes, there was. Emotion was something you did not show.
Okay.
What about
Was it
crying?
specifically in reference to
Your
crying?
Honor,
If you had to cry, you
answer
went to
that
your room.
question.
You did not cry in front of Jose.
How was that?
Crying is a part of
Spelled out.
emotion. He answered it.
Do you want to?
Someone say something about it?
Jose says he says if you cannot handle the conversation, you will go to your room until you're able to come back and deal with the situation.
All right, is that it?
That's it, Your Honor.
Okay, the people wish to inquire on those?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, regarding the time that you said that the crime didn't, or you were punished equally, you as opposed to defendants. What happened? What did you do? Or what did you and the brothers do on that occasion?
And there was all kinds of occasions as far as mischievous kids.
What happened the time that you're referring to?
Well, the time that I went in the garage and just would take things down off the shelves that should not have been taken down and relocated when I did not put them back in the right area. When Jose went to find them, where Kitty went to find them, they were not there. They were in an area where they should not have been, which means the boys should not have been in that area to touch those things, which I am the one that touched them.
Did you, with respect to the time that you referred to, that Kitty told Jose that Lyle was involved, did Kitty see you do what you called this crime?
No.
Was she told somehow that Lyle was involved in that?
She assumed. That's the only thing I can suggest.
Okay, and you said that in response to the counsel's question that she lied.
She did lie because I know specifically one instant.
Is that what you were referring to? The time that you were smoking in the garage?
Not just that one occasion.
Well, with respect to what you testified to,
Correct.
you said that Kitty lied about something that led to Lyle Menendez being punished.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
When we cut the flowers off, I cut the flowers off.
You cut flowers off.
Yes.
And then can you describe what happened there?
It was more of a temperamental thing towards Jose because of the fact that when him and I the night before had a stern discussion about how I was, my attitude and everything.
What was your attitude like?
Rebellious to his type of discipline and the way he would lock me in my room.
And why would you lock me in the room?
Okay, now we're getting off the subject. You asked him to describe something about flowers. What did you do, cut some flowers?
Yes, I cut the heads off all the flowers.
And there was some reaction to that?
Oh, yes, it was a very negative reaction to that. As far as on Kitty's part in the beginning when she spotted out what happened.
Mr. Kuriyama.
Yes.
We have all our jurors here?
This is an evidentiary hearing.
Having an interview
Whoa.
with the defense on April 26, 19.
Whoa, sorry guys. I apologize. We are not testifying in front of the jury. But I'm glad we're watching it nonetheless, because this is gripping testimony for I guess this hearing, not for the actual full trial in front of the jury. I'm curious to see if this is going to make it in front of the jury. It's a lot.
1992. Do you remember that?
You have to repeat the question, please.
Do you remember?
By the way, and this also would explain why the judge was asking some pointed questions to him. He would probably be, I would imagine, usually judges are going to be a bit more reserved and they'll kind of conceal their personal frustrations or annoyances a bit more. But I still think that that's inappropriate with a witness like this, because he's testifying to some very sensitive things, and that's pretty apparent here. And if I were the witness here, I would feel like this judge is definitely not my friend when I'm testifying to some very uncomfortable stuff, which the judge is supposed to be like water in the room. You're not supposed to really notice the judge. You're not supposed to feel like the judge is on one side or another. And if I were him, I would feel like this judge was against me as a witness. So anyway, hopefully that doesn't impact his actual testimony in front of the jury. But let's continue.
I remember having an interview with defense attorney Jill Lansing and defense attorney Leslie Abramson on April 26, 1992 at Oak Lawn, Illinois.
In 92, yes, I do.
Okay, and do you remember telling those attorneys that one of the incidents that you recalled happening at the Menendez house was you described where they went out, you and the two brothers went out and cut all the flowers off all the plants?
They did not participate in that with me. They were there with me, but they did not participate in that.
Okay, and when you said that, what you meant that they were
They were there, but they did not do the actual physical damage to the flowers.
Do you recall telling those counsels that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious and you take some of the responsibility for their activities, and you gave that example of you, the three of you going out and cutting all these flowers off the plants as one of those things that you and the brothers did.
I said, no, they did not. They were there, but they were physically did not do the flower cutting.
All right, Mr. Priyama, we're getting far afield. The only purpose of this hearing was to see if there was some foundation for the witness testifying about these events, and there seems to be. So at this point, there is sufficient for the witness to testify.
Okay, so he's going to be testifying
Let's get our
in front of the
jurors in,
jury.
please.
Wow.
Jury panel for each defendant is now in court, and
Okay, so we got both juries in the courtroom now. We just had the hearing. So that is some real next level psychological warfare, because you've got the cousin with the two brothers. They get up to mischief as kids do. And Kitty Menendez, she probably sees with every situation, they have this very harsh, abusive, punishing style for their sons. And when they're hanging out with their cousin, who's getting into the same mischief as them, and sometimes being actually the source of the mischief, it's like, oftentimes parents will, or people like me without kids, when you are taking care of someone else's kid, when you're watching someone else's kid, you can't necessarily punish them the same way that you would punish your own kid. Hopefully, though, you don't get into the realm of abuse like in this situation. But oftentimes, there's this discomfort. Like, I know how to punish my kid when it's necessary. This is how I do it. Someone else might have an entirely different philosophy. I don't feel comfortable doing the same thing with, so there may be a bit of that going on with Kitty Menendez. And let me do this real quick. So it seems that her solution is not to punish Brian, the cousin, but to have him know that they are being punished for the things that he's doing. So it's like, it's in a way, it's so dark and dirty, because that he knows what's happening with the brothers. And it's like that in itself is becoming like, this is like, I was just reading some Malcolm Gladwell, and it's going to be showing up in the next video. But one of these experiments, I'm totally blanking on the name right now, but where you have someone is supposed to go through an experiment, and in the other room, someone else is getting punished for your mistakes, and you're supposed to be the one to like punish them. There's a psychological impact that has on the person that is not getting punished, but is hearing all of the punishment in the other room. A massive, massive psychological impact. So it's like, it's almost as if, like, without having access to these experiments, I would assume, I don't remember when they were done, or I don't know if Kitty would have known about them, but it's like, that's what's going on here, is he knows that in the other room, they are being punished horribly sometimes for the things that he's doing. In a way, that's a punishment to him, even though they can't really punish him in the same way, at least not to the same degree, because they would have probably the complaints of Kitty's brother and sister-in-law coming back to them, maybe calling in authority. Like there are all kinds of things that can do. So the punishment to Brian is, we are not punishing you, and we are making sure that you know just how badly the boys are getting punished for your, it's so dirty. It is so dark. It is so sinister. And you can tell by the way that he's describing these events that these had a massive impact on him. He still carries them. This is like from their childhood, and he's still carrying them at this point as an adult as he's testifying. It's crazy. This is like, this is a lot. This is a lot that we are going through. Okay, so now we're going to be seeing probably the same testimony, maybe some more detail, because this was supposed to just get into these matters of like where he's not getting punished for cutting the flower heads off of the stems. these other things. So it was just to see if there was enough foundation for him to get into that in front of the jury. And it looks like from what the judge said, there is. So we are going to be hearing about that. We're probably going to be hearing about more things as well. So let's get into what the jury is actually going to see.
And we'll resume with the examination of the witness, Ms. Lansing.
Thank you. Mr. Andersen,
Yes.
when we broke for lunch, you were talking about situations in which Kitty would get mad, and you demonstrated for us this balling up your fists and the
Oh.
veins on the neck standing up.
Okay, wait a minute. Oh, sorry, I'm pausing again, interrupting. Because so I must have missed when they took the jury out so that they could do this little mini hearing in between, because this is so they had lunch break. Jury went off to lunch. They continued with this hearing, and now they're coming back. Okay, so not all of that was the hearing. It was just this last portion. Makes sense. Now I feel a little bit less confused than before, because when I realized that portion was a hearing, I was like, what happened? How did I miss this? Okay. Anyway.
Standing out and the gritting the teeth and the squinting the eyes. Is that correct?
Correct.
And would that only happen if it was in response, if something was going on, or would it sometimes happen when nothing was going on and no one was around?
Yes, there were instances where, in myself coming in from outside to get a drink of water, walking through the hall in the house, she'd be sitting at the kitchen table or standing at the kitchen table, looking outside or affixed to something on the wall. And at the table, sitting down is when she most frequently would do that. She would be sitting thinking of something. I don't know what it was, but then she would always just get into that routine of hers that she was thinking of something. And there were instances where that happened where nothing negative happened to either one of us three.
It was just in response to something she was thinking
Is
about?
thinking of, yes.
And would there be instances in which she would seem to be thinking about something so intently she wouldn't hear anybody, she wouldn't see anybody?
I tried talking.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
I at times did see her in those like mesmerized states where she was just affixed. I tried talking where I had to talk 2 or 3 times just to get her attention. There were times where I would make noise, but she would not move. Even when I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, whatnot. It wouldn't disturb her.
Okay. You told us about this incident in which the dishes were thrown in, or the multiple times the dishes were thrown in the sink.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Did the boys seem to think this was something unusual or react like something very different was going on?
It surprised me. No, it didn't seem like it was, I don't know, like it was something normal to them, I guess. I mean, they didn't react like I did. They didn't, I got up, I went into the room, I tried to deal with the situation, and it was not that with them, no.
And just to backtrack a little bit, when you talked about the Tupperware container that you found under the bed, you said that you looked inside and there were feces inside. Did they appear to be human? Did they have a ferret?
Objection overruled.
I know of the fact they had a ferret, but while I was there, the ferret was not there.
Okay, so this is not ferret feces that you're
No.
looking at?
No, I'm not an expert on feces, but no, it was not animal feces, no.
Understandable.
Was there a time in which Lyle came to you and asked you to talk to his father for him with regard to discipline?
Correct, yes.
And can you tell me about that? Was it more than once?
Yes.
How often did this happen?
I know of 4 instances that he came to talk with me.
Okay. And what would he say?
Well, he was concerned as to, and also very confused as to why we were all disciplined, where I was sent to my room, I was yelled at and sent to my room, door locked, and how come they got hit? He didn't understand why I never got hit.
And did he ask you to do something for him?
He asked me to please talk to his father, for which I refused.
Why?
Just in Jose's demeanor, you went through Kitty, and then Kitty would talk to Jose.
Did you talk to Kitty on his behalf?
Yes, I did go to talk to Kitty to ask not to tell her that Lyle came to me, but just to talk with her as to why are things so different between myself and the two boys.
And they were substantially younger than you, I think.
Oh, yes.
And after you went to Kitty with these complaints of Lyle's, did things change?
No.
Do you know if she ever talked to Jose about it?
No.
When Lyle would be talking to you about these situations, would he be laughing? Would he be serious? What was his
Oh,
demeanor?
no. He'd come in with a very straight face, which led me to believe that he wanted to talk about something.
Okay.
He started out calm.
Objection. No question pending.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Okay, started out calm. Did anything change in that?
His mood, I mean, he became somber as the questions came on, which then brought a waterness to his eyes.
And would he actually cry?
No, he would not break down. No, he would not bawl. No.
Were there rules in this family about whether you could cry or not?
Yes, you did not. You did not show emotion. You had to be a very strong man because the corporate man does not show emotion.
And the last time, I think you said you were visiting the boys were 6 and 9.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you started to show emotion, what happened to you?
You were sent to your room.
And
You were
was,
taken out of the sight of Jose because Jose did not want to see that.
was anything said?
Go to your room. And when you're able to come back and deal with the conversation, then you come back.
Did the boys have a choice as to whether they played particular sports, whether they went to practice or not?
Oh, that was it. It was tennis. Tennis.
And what if they didn't want to play
You made up the time
the next day?
the next day or that evening.
And would you go with the boys and the family when they went to play tennis?
And yes, at most occasions, yes.
And would they go regularly?
Yes.
When would they go?
When Jose got home from work, during the day with Kitty, on weekends, every weekend.
Directing your attention to the weekends, would they go to a public park or where did they play?
Yes, it was a public park area. It was just a nice tennis court area, yes.
Okay, and what would be the schedule with regard to their playing?
It would be 2 hours on, a half hour, 45 minutes off, then back to 2 hours on, then a half hour to 45 minutes off, and back to 2 hours on.
So they would play 6 hours of tennis,
They play a whole day.
and they would do it both days of the weekend?
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, was there a family picnic for lunch or something like that?
Not that I can recall.
Was food brought along?
Water, iced tea,
Did they eat
pops.
during the day?
No, not that I remember, because I remember being hungry. And then they said that when things got done here, we believe we go home and eat.
Did you, when the boys started playing, could they play with one hand, hold a racket with one hand?
When they were younger, I remember Jose bought Lyle a longer handled racket so he could use two hands.
Because he wasn't strong enough?
Because correct, he wasn't strong enough.
And do you remember an incident in which Lyle got upset and threw his racket?
Oh, yes.
That
Yes,
happened often?
Yes, yeah, for a while, yeah.
And what would cause him to do that?
Frustration because of
Objection, also speculation.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you see a particular incident in which his father ends up putting the racket back in his hand?
after Lyle would throw a racket or have a tantrum because either he was missing serves repeatedly, he was not playing right because his father was not, as his father was playing, he'd be, as he was running around the court chasing the ball, Lyle was returning, he'd be telling Lyle how to stand, how to go approach the ball, how to hit the ball. And it got to be too much to where he would just stop and would just throw the racket down and not want to play.
And
He would then go across the net.
when you say he,
Jose would go across the net and pick up the racket and put it back in his hand.
how old was Lyle around when you saw these types of incidents?
Well, it was at the Muncie house. It was he'd be 6, 7, like that.
Well, he was 9 the last time you were there.
77, he was 9, so
So it was the earlier
yes.
visit? And after he put the racket back in Lyle's hand, what would happen then?
Lyle was told to stand there, and Jose would go back across the net and just resume as if nothing happened.
And did he serve the ball easily to him?
No. That I found very, very strange that his father,
Objection, no question pending.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
How would he serve to Lyle?
very fast, as if he was serving to an adult.
When this type of training would be going on, would Kitty ever interfere and say they've had enough, they're just little?
No, Kitty was working with Erik.
Was she doing the same thing?
No, not at a stringent level as Jose did with Lyle.
But Erik was also 3 years younger.
Correct.
Did you see an incident in which, as a result of the playing, Lyle had a shoulder injury?
Yes.
And can you tell me about that?
For the way his father served a ball,
Objection, this is non-responsive. Your Honor.
I think this is foundational, Your Honor.
Are you describing a shoulder injury?
correct, sir.
All right, the objection overruled.
For the way his father served the ball, if you're familiar with tennis, there's a lot of force on the upper shoulder area for return. And repeatedly serving the ball, such as his father would do, having the bucket of balls there, Lyle's shoulder started to swell to the point where it was noticeable.
Did Lyle complain about it?
Oh, yes.
Did he ask to keep
He didn't want to.
playing?
He didn't want to know. Jose then stepped aside, and Kitty, because having a softer serve, continued to serve.
And I think when we were talking about the incident in which he put the tennis racket back in Lyle's hand, you said he came over the net. Did he talk to him at all, or did he just put the racket in his hand, or what?
No, he would take the racket. He would grab Lyle's hand, and he would put the racket in his hand. I mean, he would put the racket in his hand to where you heard Lyle accepting the racket.
And when he would talk to Lyle and Erik when they were at these young ages, would he stand up? Would they sit down? What would be the physical posture, say on the tennis court?
On the physical posture, it would be like this, and then in that particular area, he'd be bent over, hunched over with his hands on his knees, because he's looking down,
How far away would he be from their face?
just like if he was at the house,
Approximately 4 inches?
4 or 5 inches, just so because that's okay. That's just the way Jose was.
If Jose wanted to get your attention and nobody was paying attention to him, was there a certain form of behavior he would engage in?
Yes, he would create a ruck. Yes,
And what would he do?
he would make a noise such as opening a Tupperware container and throwing a Tupperware on the floor,
I'm sorry, opening
the Tupperware cabinet,
okay.
throwing it on the floor.
One Tupperware container?
Oh, no. He'd empty the whole shelf off.
Okay.
Or he would take the silverware drawer out and it would fall on the floor.
Would it fall or?
No, he would be
Dump?
pulled out and then it would let go and it would go to the floor.
And would he,
And then now that I've got your attention, and then
That's
he would
what-
say his piece.
did he have your attention?
Oh, of course.
And did he subsequently clean up these messes that he made? You described this sort of spacing out behavior and were there ever any times when there was a connection between that and Kitty taking something?
Well, I assumed,
Objection, culture speculation.
Sustained.
Did you come upon a cabinet that you weren't supposed to go into?
correct, yes.
And what did you see in that cabinet?
Prescription drugs,
And would you ever see her take them?
yes.
And would her behavior change afterwards?
She would become more, I don't know, I guess how a person, if they were to do a lewd,
Objection, this is speculation.
What would her behavior be?
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
What would you see?
She becomes spaced out.
Were you given the responsibility of babysitting for the boys?
Yes,
And you'd be home alone with them
yes,
and responsible for them?
yes.
Were you allowed to answer the phone?
No.
Why?
Jose did not trust the way I would take a message if anybody important were to call. Because it's his court, because it's his office, or any friend or anything.
And were you allowed to
I
make
guess
calls?
No,
Was Kitty a good driver?
no.
What kind of a driver was she?
Extremely reckless and non-caring.
And was this with the boys in the car?
Yes.
And are we talking about just the last visit in 77, or are we talking about,
Oh, no, I
Earlier.
can go back to, if you could pull the chart forward. The Cedar Grove house. The Cedar Grove house, they had a Jaguar and an older Thunderbird, like a 66 Thunderbird. And the Jaguar was the car that she was very, because it was crazy.
and was there,
Objection, I call for speculation.
All right, the objection is sustained, the last answer is stricken.
was there an incident in which she took you out to drive in the Jaguar and something unusual happened? You can just say yes or no.
Yes,
And did she say something to you before you went for that ride?
come on, kids, let's go for, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
What did she say?
She would say, well, let's pile in the car and let's go for a joyride.
Now, Cedar Grove, as far as we know, is 69 to 70. So,
It was just Belial myself.
so when you joyride is what she used the term.
Yes.
And what did this joyride consist of?
As we would be driving, she would, I don't know what it would be, but she would affix on something where she would be like, would get spaced out. And we would head right for that.
Like,
We would-
right for what? A car?
It could have been anything, could have been a
wall?
tree, and there was certain instances, and where we were going around a windy road, and I don't know what was on her mind, but the road was bending like this, and instead of her keeping format of the road, she just kept on going straight. That's how she got off in the loose gravel.
And what would you do during that time?
We would, Kitty.
And was there an incident in which the car spun out?
Yes.
And can you tell me about that?
Was going around a corner. The car did 2 360s
Whoa.
And which car was this?
in the Jaguar.
So that would have been Cedar Grove.
Yes.
And did any of you wear seatbelts?
No.
Lyle would have been less than 2 years old. Was he in any sort of car seat or restraint?
No, he was sitting on my lap.
Oh my God.
Was competition encouraged between the boys?
Very much so.
And how would that be done?
In all facets, of course, in the sports, at the dinner table when we were doing like I described earlier, the Jeopardy type dinner that they would have, in question answering, in seeing who can get ready for bed the fastest and be in the bed,
And what would happen to the loser?
would be ridiculed.
Did Lyle seem to want to please his father in terms of the thoughts that he was expressing?
To answer the question, Lyle, yes, he did want to please his father.
And would there be something unusual that would happen when he would start a sentence? In terms of what happened with the content of it?
Yes.
What would happen?
Jose would get very upset that Lyle was not speaking properly.
Now, was that grammar or a stutter or
No
what?
grammar.
Did he stutter sometimes?
Only when excited, extremely excited.
And did Erik stutter sometimes? Do you know? If you know.
That I can recall, I don't really know. No. Not that I can recall him getting real excited and stuttering to the point where I remember Lyle stuttering.
Now, in this competition that went on between the boys, they were 3 years apart. Did somebody usually win?
Most of the time, Lyle won.
I was going to say probably Lyle.
When you were talking about Kitty's driving and seeming to look straight ahead at some embankment or something like that, and she went off the road, did she just brush over the gravel lightly, or what happened?
No, she ended up using the grass and the bush and the cliff area for what the one area was. Not in the Jaguar, it's in a different car.
Okay,
And
so Erik was along.
yes, Erik was here at that time. And she ended up using that Mother Nature as a buffer, like in bumper cars, if you were to use it as to get around something. She would just use that to get herself back on the right track.
Did she stop?
No, she would keep on going.
Could you tell when punishment was going to happen? Was it predictable?
Very much so. Yes.
And what things would trigger it?
When Jose walked in the door, his demeanor when he walked in the door.
But I mean, in terms of you getting punished, would it be in response to certain things you do? Did you know?
Overruled.
Did you know what you were doing, why you were getting punished?
I would then have to, well, yes. I would have to filter back in the day what the three of us or myself did, and then have to try to pick out certain instances within that day that I felt were negative and think that was the reason why. We would never ask because an answer was not given unless there was something that was so severe that they needed to talk with us about it.
Were the boys expected to have a high tolerance to pain?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
In sports, you did not back down when hurt. You continued playing.
Was there an incident in which Lyle was hit in the face with a rock?
Yes,
Who threw the rock?
I did.
How was it that you were throwing a rock at him?
It started out innocent, but then developed into a very competitive rock throwing incident to where we were taking shelter behind things and trying to hurt each other, to the point where he went behind the doghouse and I faked a throw. He ducked, came back up to return a throw. Then I repeated with the throw. It hit the doghouse roof, ricocheted off, and then hit him in the face.
I mean,
And
I've seen kids do this.
was he injured?
Oh, yes, very much so.
What did he look like?
He looked like he got hit in the face with a board.
Was it,
His whole face where I hit him, it just instantly puffed right up and closed his eye.
was there any bleeding?
There was slight bleeding to where the skin, when it swelled, where it was cracking. When you get the veins, it was, yes.
And did you take him inside?
Yes.
And was Kitty there?
Oh, yes. She was in the kitchen.
What was her reaction?
She was in awe. She could not believe that I did that to him, that I would even think about hurting him.
And did she do something about treating the eye?
She wanted to slit a little slit to bring the blood out so the swelling would go down.
What was she going to slit it with?
Razor blade.
What?
Did she?
No, I refused to get the razor blade. She asked me to get it. And Lyle was very, very adamant at that time and crying to not allow her to do that. And I would not
She's
allow her
also
to do
an
that. I
idiot.
was pleading with her not to do that.
When Jose came home, did he see this injury?
Oh, he was very noticeable, yes.
And what was his reaction?
Oh, he
First
was,
to you.
oh, he was very, very upset. He threatened to send me home. As a matter of fact, he told me I was going home.
Okay. And did he do anything else to you?
I went to my room for the rest of the night with the door locked.
Were you fed?
This, that I remember because of what happened, no, and I don't remember being fed of eating that night because of everything happening within the late afternoon that this happened.
And what was Jose's reaction to Lyle?
He was upset. Although the boy was injured, he was very adamant on discussing with Lyle why would he even think about throwing rocks in the backyard with someone of my size, and why would he even want to be involved with that kind of, just doing that kind of thing? That was not the thing that boys did.
Was it done gently, like he?
No. He was very, very forceful in his conversation.
Was he mad?
Oh, yes.
Was he yelling at him?
It's the start, yes.
And what was Lyle doing?
Sitting there accepting what his father was giving him as far as verbal.
And do you remember which house this occurred in?
The Muncie house.
Do you remember anything about Lyle and his stuffed animals?
Yes.
What is that you remember?
He would take his anger out on him.
And how was that?
He'd rip them apart.
Would you see what would happen or what caused it, or how would this happen?
It would just be it would just be it would just happen. It would he 1 minute be there playing, and the next minute it just something angered him or something, and he would just take his anger out on the dog.
Did he seem to like his stuffed animals?
Yes, very much so.
Did he have a number of them?
For what I remember, yes.
And did he play with them?
When Jose was not home, or yes,
So it wasn't permitted when Jose was home.
correct.
What
Yes.
was wrong with it?
Boys did not play with dolls.
I'd like to have you identify some pictures, if I could mark them down.
Yes.
In addition to spending the summers at the Menendez homes, did you go on vacations with them?
As a family unit, yes.
Family, meaning your family?
My family and their family.
I've shown these pictures to the district attorney already.
All right.
Yeah, Club, I agree with you. I think this is the hardest one that we've gone through so far.
Mark the each individually as next in order.
Starting at 151.
There's just so much
Directing your
trauma.
attention to a photograph. Do you recognize the people in that photograph?
Yes.
Who's in it?
A young Lyle and my brother
And yourself?
and myself.
And do you know who was taking that picture, if you remember?
No, I could have. Well, I could.
If you don't remember,
No, I don't remember.
showing you another one, which I'm going to mark as 152. Does this appear to be the same trip?
Yes. This is Petrified Forest.
Let me get some clips.
Petrified forest is probably how I would describe the Menendez family. Good Lord. There's so much trauma that they have all lived through. I can't imagine growing up in this family.
Showing you what I've marked as 153. Do you recognize this area?
Looks like the backyard of Muncie.
And the boys, do the boys look to be about the same age they were during any of your visits?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
And 154. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is that?
That is the wooden deck off the back of the house in Muncie. And the backyard.
Now, this looks fairly dark and wooded. Was it when you were there?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Was it a dark house?
Yes.
Is there anything, is it the kind of house that made you feel comfortable, or was there something?
No.
While you were visiting the house in Muncie, did you watch Erik being taught how to ride a bicycle?
Yes.
155, Your Honor?
Yes.
And 156, which is a smaller photograph.
Is 156 the same as 155?
No, they're two different photographs. Would you look at what we've now marked as 155 and 156 and tell me if you recognize that area?
That is the street that had the cul-de-sac at the end of their Muncie house.
Okay, and that's 155 and 156.
It was the same picture.
Is this the cul-de-sac?
Yes.
Now, when you were watching Erik ride a bicycle, do you know how old he was? Do you remember which trip it was?
It was the 77 trip.
So he would have been 6 years old?
Yes.
And did you go out and watch him being taught how to ride the bicycle?
Yes.
And would Kitty and Lyle go out also?
Yes.
And where would you sit?
The three of us would stand or sit on the grass in the front yard.
And did it take a number of lessons to teach Erik how to ride a bicycle?
Yes.
How many do you think?
Days.
What was the process by which he was taught to ride a bicycle?
Jose would not allow training wheels be put on the bike because that presented an sissiness within the boys that they were not able to ride a bike without.
Objections to speculation.
That is a fact.
Would he,
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did Jose say anything about
I'm sorry, I'm
the
laughing because
appropriateness
he's
of
just arguing
training
with
wheels?
this with
Yes.
the attorney.
And what did he say?
He said the boys would look like sissies.
So Erik would not have training wheels.
Correct.
What would happen? How was he being taught?
Jose would be behind. It would be the street went down an incline towards cul-de-sac. He would put Erik on the bike, run with him for a certain 10, 20 feet, and let him go.
And what would Erik be doing?
Oh, he'd be in fear.
How would you know?
Oh, he'd be crying, not wanting to do it, and the bike would just be wobbling.
Oh God.
And
He would fall. The end result was that he fell. And then Jose would run back down, pick him up, plop him on the seat, and continue with the exercise of teaching him how to ride the bike.
and would he do this over and
Over
again?
and over and over and over and over again.
And you and Kitty and Lyle were out there the whole time, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you go to him to help him out?
Kitty stopped me.
Did she go to him to help him out?
No.
Did she ever say anything to Jose about this?
No.
When is the last time you saw Kitty?
10 days before her murder.
And can you describe the condition that what did she look like?
Like a puppet on a string.
Why do you say that?
She did not have any idea with what she was doing, saying.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
He's describing behavior, Your Honor.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
What-
That's the question.
What things would you see her do?
Do we have some foundation as to where and when this event occurred?
See, this last answer, like you can tell that he is just sickened by these memories. Like when he's almost like spitting out about Kitty, like she didn't know shit. Basically, is what he's saying here. She didn't know what she was doing. Like there's just she was pure incompetence. But the objection is interesting because other judges would probably look at that answer and say, I think you need some kind of clarification as to what you're talking about. But just by saying like, no, that answer was improper. There's a way of clarifying what he just said. The attorney can just, ask for examples. Like, give me an example of Kitty being brain dead or what have you. It's interesting. But the thing is, this witness is coming across as very credible, very sincere, very honest, And, you know, you can tell he's very nervous. So it's like seeing this come from the prosecution, he's starting to respond to the prosecution when they're objecting, like he's defending, he's getting very defensive, you know, where he's like, it's a fact, right? Because the objection came in for speculation. You can tell he's not very familiar with trials and trial process. So he's, you know, early on he was kind of fumbling with giving an answer before the question was fully asked, things like that. So you can tell this is not someone who is going to be fighting because he thinks that that's like the advantageous way of doing this. These are very natural reactions that he's having against the prosecution. And now the judge is also kind of coming in. I as the viewer, I'm starting to feel defensive of this witness and seeing not just the prosecution, but the judge, you know, coming in and kind of treating this witness in a certain kind of way. Like, it's only making me feel more defensive of this witness.
I believe you said it was 10 days before their death.
That's
Is
right.
that
Where and when?
Correct.
And where was this?
At my house
And where's your house?
in Illinois.
And why were they at your house in Illinois?
My youngest daughter was born, and Kitty was in the area with Erik at Kalamazoo, Michigan.
And what
Yeah.
happens at Kalamazoo, Michigan? What was he there for?
Tennis tournament.
Okay.
And my father wanted her to come see the child because she was coming that way to see him. And it was he wanted him to come see the child and myself.
And so was Kitty in your home?
Yes.
How long was she there?
The visit was very short. I'd say no more than an hour.
And what did you observe about her behavior during that time?
She had no frame of mind. She was just, you try to talk with her and it would be like she was just seeing right through you. She was not paying attention to you. She was her eyes were bloodshot. She was very pale. She was dressed in a very unusual way that I was used to seeing her dressed.
What was unusual about the way she was dressed? Or was it just that it was different than?
Different from what I was normally used to seeing her in. And
When you spoke to her, did she respond? Did she answer questions? Or?
my dad did most of the talking for her, which I found very strange.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Any examination on behalf of Erik Menendez? All right, further direct examination.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Andersen, do you know when Erik's birthday is?
No,
Okay. I take it, when you saw Erik and Lyle at the Hinsdale house, that wasn't during the summer that you were living with them.
no,
That's because you lived in Illinois close to Hinsdale, correct?
correct.
Hinsdale is not very far from.
Let's not lead the witness, please.
Is Hinsdale close to Oak Lawn
Yes,
where Kitty and your father grew up?
yes,
Okay. So would it be a situation where your family would go over and visit their family?
yes,
And was it during these family gatherings that Erik would somehow leave the house by himself, go across the street and be in that field that you described?
yes.
If I might approach Your Honor, here's a photograph here on
This is
this
still
side.
direct.
This photograph.
Actually, there's a couple questions here. One that I have saved. So here can't be lead on cross-examination. So this is another defense attorney who is also asking some direct examination questions of this witness, because, you know, we've got the two trials going on at once. So now this is the other defense team asking this witness some questions. So it feels like it should be a cross-examination, but it's still direct. So she's not allowed to ask leading questions of this witness. And also, Christian, also thank you for this good question. Also, I had this saved from earlier. This might be a dumb question, but is there a limit to how many objections a lawyer can raise during a testimony? First off, no such thing as a dumb question. I love it. I love these kind of questions. And the answer is no limit on objections, at least not legally, not procedurally. There is strategy-wise a limit that you might want to keep to, because at a certain point the jury will probably start getting annoyed with objections. So, if they feel like you're just trying to frustrate the process, you're trying to just like prevent this witness from testifying, like that's something that can definitely backfire. So, and also if you you object and your win-loss ratio is getting skewed by that because you are losing on most of your objections, that can also have a negative impact on the minds of the juries, because they might think, again, you're just trying to interfere, you're trying to just get in the way of this witness testifying, or they might start having questions about your competency. There's all kinds of things that can happen with that. So you don't want to over object if it's not necessary. Other things too, if there is testimony that's coming out that is totally objectionable, terrible for your case, but you look at the jury and they're, counting the square tiles on the ceiling, you don't want to interrupt, because that's going to draw their attention back to the testimony. So like something like that's an interruption to the flow of the conversation, is probably going to draw their attention back. So that's another reason why you might not want to object, even if it's a situation where you otherwise should. So that's a little bit on objections, but technically there is no limit. The limit does not exist, to quote Mean Girls.
That has Lyle on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the field that Erik would wander into?
Yes.
And at that time, between 1970 and 1972, Erik would be somewhere between an infant and 2 years old.
He was walking. Yes.
Just barely walking?
Yeah, he was walking pretty well.
Okay. If I were to tell you that Erik was born on November 27th, 1970, okay, would that make sense with your memory of how old he might have been?
I am not good with birthdays, even with my own kids. I forget my own kids' birthdays. So.
Okay. But if he's born in November of 70, okay, between November of 70 and the end of 72, he's within 2 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, 2-year-old
Now,
running
you
around.
said
Makes
that
sense.
when he would wander into this field, it would be you and someone else who would go looking for him?
My brother.
Now, you said some other relatives lived close by,
Yes.
and who was that?
Jose's sister Terry and Carlo. His Jose's sister Terry and her husband Carlos.
And to your knowledge and based on your acquaintance, did Terry and Carlos have daughters, little girls?
Yes.
And did those daughters live with them also in Hinsdale nearby?
Yes.
And was their house across that field?
Yes.
Now, apart from the tennis that you've described, were there other sports that Erik was involved in during the time that you spent with the family in Muncie?
Yes.
And what sports was Erik involved in?
Swimming. It wasn't exactly a competitive swimming type thing. It was
Why don't
just,
you move closer to the microphone?
Yeah.
it was not a competitive swimming thing. It was just something that extra than tennis that they did.
Okay, this was in addition to tennis?
Yes.
And was that true in 1975 as well as in 1977?
In
Both trips?
75, it was swimming. In 77, it was tennis, swimming, and then soccer was at that point.
Okay, so in 1977, in the summer of 77, when Erik would have been about 6.5, he was involved in tennis, swimming, and soccer.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes. As
And-
far, well, okay, but tennis was the primary.
Okay. And on these weekend outings that you've described, you said that Jose would be working with Lyle for this 6-hour period and that Kitty would be working with Erik.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty played tennis also.
Yes.
Kitty was athletic.
Yes.
And would she be working with Erik for the same 6 hours?
On and off, yes.
And was Erik only allowed water and tea over the course of the day as well?
It's the best of my memory. I never saw him eat anything else.
That's a lot for a young kid. 6 years old?
Now, I just wanted to clarify with respect to Erik at 4.5, say in the summer of 1975. You said you noticed a change between what his personality was like at that age and what it was like when he's 6.5 in the summer of 77.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall
Yes.
that? Would you describe for us what happened, what was different about his personality after 6?
After 6.5?
No, when he's 6.5.
Oh, between the 2 years, I did not.
Mhm.
The first year, he seemed to be more outgoing. He was more willing to want to be with Lyle and myself. And just, he seemed to be a lot more easier going.
Okay.
When I came back in 77, extremely introverted, did not really want to be as much around.
Objection calls for speculation. Motion strike.
All right, the objection sustained to the last portion of the answer. You may continue with another question.
He was introverted. Was
Did he
he was
ever
quieter?
express
Yes.
he didn't want to be around?
Did he?
Objection.
That would be my
All right,
question next.
Objection sustained.
Okay. Was he quieter or noisier?
Quieter,
Was he happier or sadder?
sadder,
Did he participate more with you and Lyle or less?
There you
less.
go.
Was he friendlier or
Your
unfriendlier?
Honor, I object to this line of questioning. Just ask what you observed. Giving this multiple
Come on, this has to come in.
All right, it still tends to be leading if you can ask it in a more open-ended way.
Were you struck when
True,
you
but-
first
yeah, okay.
knew Erik as a baby, even in Hinsdale? What kind of disposition did he have as a baby? If you can remember.
very careless
Careless?
Exactly.
with himself. I
That's
mean,
why
it's just
this
like a
one is
little,
necessary.
just like a typical infant is what I took it as.
Well, I mean, how was he with respect to other people?
He liked his aunts and his uncles.
He seemed to like people.
Yes,
He was outgoing and friendly.
yes.
Did he seem to have a happy or up kind of disposition or a reserved and quiet kind?
Back in Hinsdale, we talking?
Yeah, when he was a baby.
Uppity.
Up?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't mean uppity. You don't mean snobbish. You mean
No, I mean up in his, he was
Happy.
just happy, yes.
Now, speeding ahead to the summer of 1977, did he still strike you as a happy child?
No,
Did Jose appear to give as much attention to Erik as he did to Lyle?
no,
In this competitiveness that you've described, this was Jose encouraging the boys to be competitive with each other.
yes.
Did Kitty do the same thing?
Nowhere near as frequently as Jose, but
Did she
yes.
do it at all? Was any allowance made in this competition for the fact that Erik was 3 years younger than Lyle?
No,
With respect to Jose's setting up of competition.
no,
And I think you said that the loser in these competitions would be ridiculed.
yes,
And I think you've also said that most of the time Erik was the loser.
yes.
And how would he be ridiculed?
He would be talked to in such a manner to when you belittle somebody because they've done wrong or did not do up to the satisfaction of that person.
So he'd be
That-
belittled.
Yes.
Would he be called names?
Swearing names, no.
Any kind of names. Dummy, stupid, slowpoke, jerk, anything.
There was his mother would call him stupid.
And you've talked about episodes where you could hear what sounded like Erik and Lyle being strapped with a belt, correct?
Yes.
And how old was Erik, or strike that, how young was Erik when you first heard that?
When he was with the 77 visit.
And was it during that visit that you saw the bruises that you've described on his upper thigh and buttocks?
Yes.
And this belt that Jose used, do you remember what it looked like?
It was a dress belt, yes.
A dress belt?
Yes.
Did it have a metal
For a second.
buckle?
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the bike riding incident that you've described, okay? Concerning Jose pushing Erik on. This was a two-wheeler, correct?
Correct.
And you said over the course of several days, the same activity was being repeated.
Yes.
And at the end of this, was Erik still falling off the bike in the cul-de-sac?
Yes.
And what did Jose do with the bike?
He got frustrated to the point where the bike was physically just thrown in the garage.
Was Erik allowed to play with the bike?
No.
So Jose took the bike and threw it in the garage?
Yes.
And when Erik was being pushed down this hill into the cul-de-sac, was he making any sounds?
At points he would scream yes.
At points he would do what?
He would scream.
Scream in fun? Scream in fear?
No, it was scream in fear.
And when you saw him fall off the bike, did you ever see him bleeding?
Yes.
Did you ever observe the scar that Erik has on his left elbow?
As of recent, no.
Did you observe that he got that scar hitting the ground in that cul-de-sac?
He got beat up pretty bad on numerous occasions.
But
and falling.
concerning the bike riding, do you recall a day when he gashed open his elbow in that cul-de-sac?
Yes.
And when he fell off the bike in these repeated efforts, was he ever taken for medical treatment?
No.
And Kitty did nothing and said nothing when this was happening? Was that what you said?
She would stop me from going down to assist.
And she didn't assist
No,
herself?
she did not assist herself.
Now, you said at some point that in some way Kitty would intercede when Jose was being tough on the boys.
Only Erik, yes.
And how would she intercede for Erik?
She would interfere by telling Jose not to be so mean with Erik.
And how would Jose react to her interference?
He would turn and look at Kitty in his way that he would go, Kitty.
So he would get angry at her.
Yes.
And now, was that more true during the period when Erik was in 75, when he was 4.5, than in 77 when he was 6.5?
It was more so in 77.
More in 77?
Yes.
Was Jose tougher on Erik in 77 than in 75?
Yes.
Did you ever say anything to Kitty about why she never interfered while Erik is getting hurt with this bike riding business?
Because Jose was taking care of the matter.
Is that what she said?
Yes.
I have nothing further on.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson,
Sound is out.
Menendez would take the defendants to the park to play tennis. You indicated that it would be about 6 hours each day.
Yes.
that correct? And was that every weekend?
Yes.
And when Mr. Menendez would come home from work, would he spend a lot of time with the defendants?
Yes.
Would he talk about, or would he tutor them at dinner?
Yes.
Ask them questions about what was going on in the world?
Yes.
You were saying something about Jeopardy questions.
Yes.
He would do that on a regular basis.
Every dinner, yes.
He wanted his sons to be well informed.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Rephrase the question.
Did it
Yeah.
appear to you that he
That's
wanted his sons to be well informed?
That's a proper objection.
calls for conclusion.
Sustained.
These questioning sessions, were you involved in the questioning sessions?
Yes.
In fact, you indicated that Lyle Menendez could answer questions that you couldn't, correct?
Yes, he could.
And you were, what, about 10 years older?
No,
Or actually, 6 years older,
6 years
and
older.
about almost 10 years older than Erik
8
Menendez?
years older.
And Lyle Menendez would be able to answer questions that you couldn't answer?
Yes, at times.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Menendez spent a lot of time with his sons?
Yes.
Did he appear to care about how his sons were growing up?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Yes, again. Speak up.
If you just use those wheels a little bit, move forward.
I'm trying to be relaxed.
The objection is overruled. The question.
No, sorry, do not. Please repeat the question.
Did it appear that Mr. Menendez was concerned about how his sons were growing up?
In what respect?
Well, he spent a lot of time with them, discussing things with them. He spent a lot of time with their tennis. Be fair to say?
He spent a very lot of time with their tennis.
Okay. He spent a lot of time asking them questions about life in general, about especially at the dinner table.
The dinner, well, like I say, yes, but the questions that were asked of the boys was a corporate level type questioning. It was nothing of like what you read in the comics or what, nothing of that matter. Never.
Would it be fair to say that he wanted his sons to be
weird
successful in business as
Thing
he
to
was?
do with
That was the goal.
Now, you said that there was some competition that Mr. Menendez, Jose Menendez, fostered between the brothers. And you had indicated that he would have a competition between them brushing their teeth the fastest and getting into bed the fastest, correct?
One more time.
You were talking about a competition that Mr. Menendez had the brothers compete.
Okay.
You had indicated, for example, he would tell them to go brush their teeth, and whoever can brush their teeth fastest would be the winner.
Correct.
And there was other motivating tools that he used for them to race into getting into bed first, correct?
Yes.
So he would kind of use these tools to get them to do things faster. Would that be fair to say?
Not
It's
faster.
competition?
It's competition.
Okay. And that would include getting to the dinner table. If he called the brothers to dinner, there'd be a competition to see who can get to the dinner table the fastest?
No.
Would that be fair to say?
No.
Now, Mr. Andersen, you indicated that
Korean was
you
trying to
spent
frame this
several
as,
summers
like-
with the Menendez family. Is that correct?
Yes.
Korea was trying to frame this as like, well, these are every parent has, tricks that they use to try to get their kids to do things faster, to, like lasso cats essentially, right? Incentivize them to do certain things in a certain way that they want them or need them to do, and also kids can be competitive. And so he's trying to frame it that way. And I get it. You got to do something on cross-examination. This is a tough witness to cross-examine, in my opinion, because he's like, at this point, his testimony has been anything but boring. He has been very engaging to watch this and to see everything that he has had to say unfold. And he's a very credible and sympathetic witness. So trying to deconstruct the direct examination that he just gave is very difficult to do. So let's keep going and see if this cross-examination can sort of poke some holes in this testimony.
Yes.
So far,
And
I don't see it.
you've indicated at least 2 times, one in 1975 and one in 1977 at the Muncie home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, there were other times that you spent the summers with the Menendez family. Is that
Yes.
right? Where and when were those other visits, these summer visits that you had?
The one summer visit was my first one in Cedar Grove.
Okay, let's take it one at a time. Cedar Grove, was that the first one?
As far as for now, are we looking at, you have to be more descriptive as far as what time frame and how long of a period was I staying at these homes?
Yes. First of all, you have to establish where you were, and then I'll ask you the question about how long you were there. So let's get back to the Cedar Grove, New Jersey house. What year was it that you went to that house to stay?
Erik was not born. It would have to be 70, 69, 70.
Okay, and was this in the summertime that you went to visit?
Yes.
How long did you stay on that occasion?
On that particular occasion, I ended up only staying there for about a month because I hurt myself badly.
You hurt yourself?
Yes.
How did you hurt yourself?
I sprained my neck jumping into the pool that was not filled all the way
And where was this at?
in the backyard.
Oh my God.
Did you jump into the pool on the shallow end?
There was no shallow end. It was just up above the ground. The pool was all one depth.
Oops. Okay, so you spent a month on that occasion.
So, by the way, that is if there is not adequate fencing or a cover on that pool, and a kid jumps into it, teenager, anyone under 18 jumps into it, a lot of jurisdictions have recognized what is called attractive nuisance, meaning that you have something that is attractive to a kid that they are going to, that the likelihood of them jumping into getting all up in is higher. Pools are an example of that. That if they get injured because you have not adequately maintained that thing, such as maintaining the water levels up to a certain point in that pool, and they get injured, that is a potential for liability. I don't know if attractive nuisance was an accepted concept at the time when that incident happened, but just a little tidbit for everyone. There's just so much going on here. That's just wild.
With the family. And what was the next time that you visited in the summer?
The next time that I revisited them for a length of time would be in 75 when I was them at the Muncie house.
And how many months did you spend that summer?
The whole summer. The entire spread of the summer, 3.5, 4 months.
3.5 or 4 months. And then you were also a visitor in 1977?
Correct.
And how many months were you there?
Same.
3.5 to 4 months?
Correct, the whole summer.
Were there then 3 times that you visited the Menendez family at their home in the summer? Were those the only times?
In the summers, yes.
Okay.
Except but in 77, I assisted in them moving to Princeton Junction.
Okay. Now, you indicated that there were times when you got disciplined by Mr. Menendez.
Yes.
And there were times when you weren't sure why you were disciplined. Would that be fair to say?
On some occasions, yes.
There were times when it was clear why you got disciplined.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you had indicated in direct examination your opinions about the defendants during that period of time. Do you remember talking to the defense attorneys in this case on April 26, 1992 at Oak Lawn, Illinois? Jill Nansen and Leslie Abramson?
All right.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was Indy. I did not register that. Yes, she and Holmes are kind of getting into stuff.
As far as the exhibits, those exhibits that are received in evidence will all be in the jury room, and you'll get them at one time. It's really too cumbersome to have them be distributed at this point. All right, let's take a recess then, since apparently the examination will be for quite a while yet. So don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 15 minutes after 3. That's 3:15. All right, everyone is present and the witness is still on the witness stand. Mr. Kuriyama.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Andersen, I'm going to take you back to your first visit with the Menendez family in Cedar Grove for that 1 month period. Would you describe for the jurors what that visit was like for you?
At that time, it was a very carefree type of environment. From what I can remember of that incident, is nothing very strangely out of the ordinary.
In fact, you told the defense attorneys that.
All right, why don't you just ask the question?
Okay. Did you indicate that it was a happy house with no pressure?
Still calling for hearsay.
All right, why don't you just ask the question? Would he describe it in that way?
Okay. Would you describe that household when you first made your visit to the Menendez household in Cedar Grove, the first time you went to stay in the summer? Would you describe that as a happy house with no pressure?
No.
Why would you ask that question?
Did you describe it that way when you spoke to the defense attorneys in this case?
It wasn't exactly it wasn't exactly an extremely happy household. There was happy times.
Mr. Andersen, I said it was a happy house with no pressure, not an extremely happy house. Is that how you characterized it?
At that point, no, I don't remember any extreme pressure, no.
In fact, you had indicated that it was a happy house with no pressure.
No, there was some, but nothing extremely, no. Nothing that stands out in mind as far as extreme pressure, no.
But he's
Is there
talking
anything
about
that
the early
stands out in your
years.
mind with respect to any kind of pressure whatsoever?
No.
Now, in 1975, you went to visit the Menendez home again for this 3.5 to 4 months, and then again in 1977, correct?
Yes.
There was something you liked about going to the Menendez house, I take it, for the summers?
Yes.
What was that?
Just getting away from my neighborhood where I lived and being with Lyle, mostly.
You had fun with the Menendez family?
I had fun with Lyle and Erik.
And you enjoyed your times with the Menendez family? Those 3 occasions that you've discussed?
And I enjoyed my times with my cousins.
In fact, in 1975, did you see any interaction between, you've already discussed interaction between Jose Menendez and the brothers. Did you see any interaction between, first of all, Kitty Menendez and Erik Menendez?
No.
By the way, I missed this earlier, but in the regular chat, Janny Wallace with a Bike Club member chat. Thank you so much. She says 6 months part of Bike Club, more to come. Thank you so much. Welcome to pizza status. But thank you so much for being a supporter of the channel, and also thank you to Sandra Ramirez for. I saw that you were just popping in to say hi, but not just that, you also are gifting 10 Bike Club memberships to some folks in the chat. Thank you so much, Sandra. You're always so kind and generous with gifting those memberships to people. And it's just so wonderful. So thank you. And to everybody that is now a member of Bike Club, I see Sokatoa, Gwendolyn SS, Jackie Crow, Matthias Holmstrom, Marina, Flyers Gal 12. Let's see here. Becca, CJ Drake, What If Jenny, On the Ground. Well, all of you guys are now members of Bike Club. So welcome. I hope to see you guys on Friday and our members only casual Friday stream, where we just have for members of Bike Club on out of YouTube memberships. We just kind of hang out and talk about stuff, sometimes about law, often not about law. So anyway, so welcome. And thanks again to Sandra, and thanks for the comment earlier from Jan.
Did you see Erik Menendez ever hold on to his mother's legs?
Yes.
And did you further see Mrs. Menendez, Mrs. Kitty Menendez, pat her son on the head?
Yes.
So you saw some interaction with the family, correct?
The type of interaction that was that I know of was that the only time that I remember Erik running and hugging his mother's leg was in the fact that he was about to be disciplined. He just didn't willfully run up to his mother, as you say, and just to hug his leg. No.
His mother was protective of him the time that you saw her. Is that correct?
In 75.
Now, you've indicated that there were times when you and the brothers were disciplined, correct?
Yes.
Would you describe the way that you conducted yourself during these visits?
In what manner, as far as when I was being disciplined?
Well,
question.
in order to get disciplined, did you misbehave?
Yes.
And you were a handful. Would that be fair to say?
I was, yeah, you could say I was a handful.
And did you characterize yourself as being mischievous?
Yes.
And did you characterize the relationship you had with the brothers, that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious?
Not malicious, mischievous.
Malicious. Did you characterize it that way?
He just said no, asked and answered.
Not, well, how do you define malicious? How do you want me to define malicious?
Perhaps would it refresh your present recollection to take a look at the defense report, the interview that you gave on April 26, 1992?
If you wish.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
So first off, Gwendolyn SS with a member chat. I can't pull it on the screen because it's StreamYard. It says, thank you for the membership gift. Thank you, Gwendolyn, for your chat. And Debbie Faison Cook says, I have pizza now. Welcome to pizza status. Thank you so much for being a longtime Bike Club member as well. There's also a lot of conversation in the chat about the prosecution victim blaming and kind of like explaining away or trying to normalize or neutralize abuse. I am conflicted about this because, as lawyers, you are supposed to, advocate for your side. You're supposed to zealously advocate for your side. And it could be that the prosecution, the attorneys simply don't believe this narrative about abuse. They might not believe it at all. In which case, from their perspective, to say like, no, like these were not abusers, they didn't deserve any of this, that's the kind of move that they're going to move forward with. Hearing this testimony, I would have a very hard time with that strategy. I would have a very hard time with that strategy because this comes across as very credible. I would personally much rather go with another strategy that basically says, look, abuse or not abuse, that does not excuse what the brothers did on the back end of all of this. Like the law does not allow people to be vigilantes. Vigilante justice is not allowed under the law. And because if we did allow that, there would be chaos. There's other strategies that you can go with that aren't quite this hard, because this can also backfire too. Because if you're playing this other strategy saying, no, there was no abuse and you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, it can really backfire, because if the jury is siding with the witnesses that are saying otherwise, then they may look back at the prosecution and be like, you're a horrible person for trying to like sell me this bill of goods here. So I don't know. So yeah, there's a lot to work through this. Also, Shireen with a member chat, thank you so much, says, thanks, Sandra, you are the best. Yes, thank you again to Sandra for gifting those memberships. And thank you to Shireen for being a longtime member as well, and also for being a wonderful mod helping to keep the conversation and the dialogue flowing forward. So okay, let's continue with this. But I definitely understand people having a very strong visceral reaction to the prosecution's angle here. There may very well have been people on the jury that were feeling this way. Jurors are made of humans for a good reason, right? So people can, kind of take that with them when they're thinking, like, what is the jury thinking? So anyway, let's continue.
Show you defense report dated April 26, 1992, the second page. And ask you to read the highlighted portion.
The orange highlighted?
Orange, yes.
That was the first to admit.
Okay, just read it to yourself.
Oh. It says malicious there.
Yes, Mr. Anderson, does that refresh your present recollection, sir?
Yes.
Did you indicate to your defense counsel that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious?
Yes.
And you gave one example of an incident where the three of you cut all the flowers off the plants.
Not the three of us, no, just myself.
Okay. Does this
The
indicate that it was the three of you that did that? Is this an error? This is what
The
you just
three of
read.
us were the boys were with me and watched me do it.
Now, did Kitty Menendez get mad at you for cutting all the flowers off from all the plants at the house?
Kitty got mad at me for doing that.
Did you indicate to the defense attorneys that Kitty never got upset with you about that?
She never got upset about a lot of different things. She would at times blow a lot of things off, but for that particular incident, yes, she did get upset with me.
Okay, so as
Trying
you've
to impeach,
indicated,
but it's not working.
you were mischievous and malicious, correct? While you visited with the Menendez family, correct?
The word malicious is not
He's trying to
considered.
put
I
words in
was
his
not
mouth.
always malicious, as the proof definition of the word malicious is.
There were
I was more so mischievous, and that was probably the word I should have used.
okay. Now, you also indicated that you were a smoker during that period of time, correct?
Yes.
Did the Menendez parents know that you were smoking?
No.
They didn't. Was there any time that they ever found out that you were smoking?
There was one instance where we were down in the garage, Lyle and myself, and I had lit up a cigarette, and I heard Kitty coming, and I put that cigarette out. She smelled the smoke.
Obviously, cigarette smoke.
Yes.
Now, how old were you?
Myself?
Yes.
I was 12.
12 years old. And did Kitty Menendez get a little upset that there had been...
She asked who was smoking.
Just let me ask the question.
I'm
please.
sorry.
Did Kitty Menendez ever become upset with you for smoking in the garage in that period of time?
She did not get upset with just myself. She got upset with the fact that she smelled the smoke. I wanted to know which one of us were smoking. Both Lyle and myself didn't confess at all.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Both Lyle and myself did not confess at all. We clammed up. We would not talk to her about it.
So she didn't know
Who?
whether both of you were smoking. Now.
Correct.
Now, you also related an incident where you and Lyle Menendez had a rock throwing fight,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
And it was a situation where you threw a rock and you injured Lyle Menendez in the face.
Yes.
Now, when Mr. Jose Menendez came home, he didn't slap you upside your head, did he?
No.
He sent you to your room.
First, he verbally gave me a very good verbal discipline before sending me to my room, then locking the door thereafter.
Okay, and you had indicated that you believed that you didn't get fed. Is that right?
I'm not understanding your questioning as far as when that was.
after Mr. Menendez came home and saw that his son Lyle had been severely injured by a rock thrown by you in a rock fight,
Mm-hmm.
he
Yes.
reprimanded you, correct?
Yes.
He never physically harmed you in any way, did he?
Objection, asked and answered.
He sent,
He said he yelled at me for what I did and sent me to my room and locked the door.
okay. Now, on direct examination, you said that you believed that you were not fed. You were just simply locked in the room.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember telling the defense attorneys on April 26, 1992,
Page and
actually April 27th, 1992, it's the last page,
Here comes an impeachment attempt.
the first full paragraph. Do you recall being interviewed on successive days in Oakland,
objection. I don't see
Illinois?
what you're talking about.
Right. Regardless of that, that's not a legal objection. We'll point to the particular portion, Mr. Curiel.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you indicate
Wait a minute, Your Honor, to find what.
Sure.
it's
So I'm going to pause real quick while they're figuring that out. You know, he by today's day, I want to say now I was like 5 years old when this trial was happening. I was really little. So I don't have as good a gauge on like what attitudes were towards abuse at this time. But I think if I remember hearing correctly, around this time, like if the idea of mental emotional abuse was not as strong as physical abuse. It's a lot easier. I think now today we have a much stronger idea of that mental and emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. You know, you might not have outward signs of it with bruising and breaks and scars and all that kind of stuff, but you know, it is just as damaging, sometimes even more damaging than that. So it's like that question that Kuriyama asked of like, well, he didn't physically hit you, did he? It just feels so cringeworthy by today's standards. Like looking at it from today, like that is not something that would fly well with a jury, in my opinion. Because we have learned so much more about abuse and the different forms that it can take. However, also I would argue that withholding a meal from him for that is a physical it is a physical aspect of abuse as well. Like that, even if it's not a hit or a slap or, you know, something like that, it is withholding something that is physical that somebody needs to survive. So I would still consider that to be physical abuse. But yeah, it's hard not to really emotionally react to Kuriyama's cross-examination right now. And I'm trying to think, you know, what were the attitudes in 1993 towards these kinds of concepts? You know, like what would the jury have been just as viscerally outraged as like I'm feeling right now, and as a lot of you guys I know are feeling? I see it in the chat. I see these reactions. So it's wild. It's really wild. But he's also trying to impeach him. He's also trying to he's brought up this malicious activity, right? He's saying the witness is saying, you know, as a kid I was mischievous, and then Kuriyama's trying to say, well, you were malicious too, right? And he's like, I mean, I don't think so. But he keeps trying to like get the witness to admit that he was malicious, but he's not going to do it. He's just not going to. So it's like he's trying to like force feed him this word, and it's not going to work. This is not a method by which any witness is going to say like, well, actually, now that I think about it, yes, I was a terrible, horrible human being, and I did things intentionally, and I tried to harm other people around me because I had malicious intent, because I'm an evil person. Like no one's going to do that. So he's trying to impeach him in these various ways with these little things. So far it's been ineffective. Let's see if this impeachment actually works.
It's the last page. Yeah, you don't have to cover that. It's the last page of the 27th report. Counsel ready?
No. Okay, I'd like a page.
It's the first, yes. I don't have numbers on mine.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, do you recall stating to the defense attorneys that after this rock throwing incident where you hurt Lyle Menendez, that Jose got home and sent you to your room?
Yes.
And you had to stay there for 2 days and could only leave when you asked Kitty to go to the bathroom?
For that length of time,
Correct.
yes, yes.
And
That was a
that
very
you-
severe punishment to him.
That you ate the meals that she brought to you in the room?
That
Correct?
first night, I did not have any meals.
Were you fed at any time during that
The
period?
second day, about the day after the night went by and was in the morning of the next day, yes,
So you do remember that now?
yes,
And you indicated that Jose said that he should send you home for starting to throw rocks,
yes.
that it was dangerous.
That I hurt, no, not that I threw rocks, so that I hurt Lyle and that I would do something of that nature.
Did he in
Of course,
fact send you home early?
ironic from these parents.
No.
He allowed you to stay with the family on, correct?
That was after a phone call was made to my father, which he insisted Kitty to make a phone call to my father.
And your father was notified of what you had done?
Objection, our cost reducer.
Sustained.
There was a call made to your father.
To just tell him what I did, yes.
Now, Mr. Anderson, you indicated that there was a difference between the discipline that you received as opposed to what Erik and Lyle Menendez received, correct?
Yes,
You weren't the son of Jose Menendez.
correct.
Objection,
You-
argumentative.
Overruled.
Now, you did indicate, however, that you had been disciplined with a belt, correct?
No,
Ever?
no, I was threatened with it, but I was never hit with
Who were
it.
you threatened with the belt?
By Jose,
I believe in direct examination, you indicated that you had been in discipline. You had, a belt had been used against you. Is that correct?
Right, that's misstating the evidence.
All right, are you asking that it was done by Mr. Menendez or by
No,
someone
no.
else?
Did somebody else use a belt in disciplining you?
no,
Now, your parents, according to this chart, are Brian and Pat Andersen, correct?
yes,
Now, you indicated that you were frightened when Kitty Menendez was throwing these dishes in the sink, correct?
at first, yes, I was quite startled.
Now, in these incidents, she never physically harmed you, did she?
No.
Or her sons?
When throwing the dishes, are we talking about now?
Yeah, in the sink.
No, there was nobody. The kids were in the other room.
Okay, so when she got frustrated or mad, she would just throw these dishes.
Yes,
And you, in fact, it would usually be out of the presence of the brothers. Is that correct?
we'd be in the other room watching TV.
Okay, so you weren't physically right there when it happened.
No, no. I'd have to come into the room to see it.
Now, what else is it that you liked so much about the Menendez home that you wanted to keep returning to visit with them during the summers?
The second year in 77, it's not that I wanted to go back. It's just that my father told me I was going there.
Your father told you were going there?
Yes. And also, I did like to be with Lyle.
Okay.
And there was another reason because he had told me that I was going to Kitty and Jose's for the summer. And I was excited for the fact that I was going to be with Lyle. I always thought more of Lyle than I did of Erik.
He was much closer in age to you, is that correct?
Correct.
You were 6 years older than Lyle and about 9 years older than Erik, correct?
Correct.
Now, why is it that your father wanted you to go to the Menendez house?
Objection, possible speculation.
Sustained.
Did your father ever tell you why he wanted you to go?
No,
Overruled.
Had you been acting up at home so that he wanted you to go away for the summer?
You remember objection, speculation, that his father never told him why he was sent back.
Objection sustained to the form of the question.
Mr. Anderson, do you know why your father wanted you to go to the Menendez house?
No.
1975? You have no idea?
no. He just asked me if it's something I wanted to do after I argued the fact, and then I finally said, yeah, that sounds like a fun idea. Because he described things that I would be doing with the family.
And was that in 1975?
No, that was in 77.
77? In fact, isn't it true that Jose Menendez paid for tennis lessons for you as well as his own sons?
He wasn't just,
Form of the question on our front of
Overruled.
Is
You
that
can answer the
correct?
question.
yes,
And did he pay for you to have lessons with a tennis professional named Roscoe Tanner?
yes, but briefly. It was a very brief encounter. If I may say, it was less than an
There's
hour.
no question pending. You know, there were often times, as you have indicated, that Jose Menendez would want to speak to Lyle alone. Is that correct? Fair to
Yes,
say? And in fact, if there was disciplining to be done, he would not do it in anyone else's presence. He would usually take Lyle to another room. Is that correct?
yes,
He didn't want to embarrass Lyle in front of all these people, did he?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, you've indicated that when you went to Kitty Menendez, that, well, let me ask you this. If you ever had a problem with discipline from Jose Menendez in the form of going to your room, would you ever go to your Aunt Kitty and ask for help in that regard?
yes.
And would she give you help?
No, because she told me no.
Didn't you tell the defense attorneys, page 4, second paragraph of the April 26, 1992 interview,
I'm going to object that, Your Honor, because it's not impeachment.
What line?
Your Honor, it's the second paragraph, the second sentence.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did,
Overruled.
Mr. Anderson, isn't it true that you told the defense attorneys in this case that if you had problems with Jose, you would talk to Kitty about it and she would frequently be able to help you out?
His objection is vague as to time, which house he's talking about.
Overruled.
Is it-
Is that correct, Mr. Anderson?
At times, Kitty would help me, yes.
Now, during the period of time that you were there during these 3 summers, Mr. Anderson, you never saw any physical or any sexual abuse, did you?
Objections compound.
Rephrase the question.
Mr. Anderson, during the period of time that you were at these houses, you never saw any sexual abuse, did you?
We were not allowed in the room.
You saw no sexual abuse, is that correct?
If you don't want to consider the showers that they took together after they were playing tennis, I found kind of strange.
Did you see any evidence of sexual abuse yourself?
We were not allowed in the room.
Answer the question.
No,
In fact, you told the defense attorneys that you never saw anything like that. Isn't that correct?
yes.
Showers together. That is weird.
Now, how would you describe the brothers in your later visits? That is, in 1975 and 1977.
And which brother?
Well, let's take Lyle Menendez first. How would you describe the way that he behaved?
He was a curious kid that just took my lead for a lot of cases. And he was not afraid to do things that I did.
And
What
how-
as far as his personality is concerned, he, to me, looked the same, was acting the same between 75 and 77.
and how would you describe Erik Menendez during that period of time?
There was a radical difference in him. He, at 75, was more outgoing. He was a lot more caring, more thing to be around, more fun to be around. But in 77, I was shocked by such the introvert that he became. He would close me out. He would go off and play by himself.
Mr. Andersen?
Excuse me, have the witness finished answering the question?
Yes, had you completed your answer?
No, I have not. You would try to talk with Erik, and he would not want to talk. Like, how are things going? I haven't seen you in a while. How is your tennis? What's new, type of thing. He did not want to talk. He was almost like a scared to talk to me.
Now, this is when he was, what, 5 years old?
No, this was in 77. He'd be 6.5 or so.
Did you describe the brothers a little differently in your interview with the defense attorneys on April 26, 1992?
I may have used different words, maybe, or something.
May I refresh your present recollection? May I approach, Your Honor? Page 4, the second to the last paragraph. 26.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this because it is a compound description.
All right, objection overruled. At this point, he's just being
last one.
shown something to refresh his recollection.
Right.
Well, that's after the visit was established.
Mr. Andersen, does that refresh your present recollection as to what took place? Or how you characterize the brothers?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question again, calling for a compound answer.
Overruled.
Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
The initial,
Question is just, does it refresh your recollection?
yes.
It does. Did you tell the defense attorneys,
Your Honor, I'm going to object. May we approach?
Not at this time.
Mr. Andersen,
But
did
Your Honor,
you?
we can't make a record or prevent prejudicial information.
Not at this time. Objection is overruled. You may ask the question.
Here's where someone asked to approach and
Did
was
you
denied.
tell the defense attorneys in describing the brothers that the brothers were,
Objection misstates the information in the report. Doesn't use the word brothers.
All right, counsel is correct. Why don't you
Your
rephrase the
Honor.
question?
thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to read this verbatim. Okay, Mr. Andersen.
I'm still objecting, Your Honor, that it's a joint description.
Well, first of all, you asked the witness to refresh his recollection. He said yes. So why don't we find out how it's been refreshed?
Did this passage that you've read refresh your recollection as to what you told the defense attorneys?
After time spending with the boys after being there in 77, not the initial contact.
Okay. After being with the brothers in 1977, you formed this opinion as reflected on page 4 of the report of April 6th. Is that correct?
That is what had developed by their personality as I lived in the house.
Okay. And did you describe the boys as being hyper, looking for attention, highly emotional, vindictive, angry, and destructive of property?
Yes.
And is that an accurate reflection of what the brothers were like?
Yes. In 77 when I came back to live.
By the way, none of that is inconsistent with behavior by someone who has been abused in the ways that he has described. So, like, I would expect someone to be acting out like that, getting very angry because you have all of these repressed emotions at home. So, like, having that anger like get channeled elsewhere, getting very erratic, begging for attention from other people outside of the home or even within the home. Like, all of these are things that can 100% coincide with the history of being abused, and especially abused at this level. Ugh. That's not a win for the prosecution to get that answer.
Thank you. Now, you've indicated that you were grounded at times and sent to your room, correct?
Yes.
And you were kept from actually interacting with the brothers on occasions. Is that
Yes,
correct? And that's because of misbehavior. Is that fair to say?
on my part, yes.
Would Jose Menendez, in addition to spending time with his sons with regard to asking them questions about current events and with tennis, would he also be involved in other activities with the brothers?
No, not that I can recall. Not that I can really recall.
Mr. Anderson, do you recall when Mr. Menendez wanted to teach the brothers how to box, how to protect themselves?
Yes.
And he spent time working with the brothers, is that correct?
Well, it was quite frequent, yes.
Okay, and you saw this interaction.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, you also indicated in direct examination that Kitty Menendez was reckless driving,
Yes.
drove kind of fast,
Oh, yes.
and you indicated that, or did you indicate that the brothers were not wearing seatbelts?
Yes.
Were there seatbelts in the car at that time?
Oh, yes.
What year was that car?
I don't know, 77, 75, when I went to visit in Hinsdale, when I went to visit the Cedar Grove house.
Was it you? I think you referred to a Jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a brand new car?
No. Oh,
Okay, it
no.
was an older model.
Oh, no, I was an older model, yeah.
Did it have
That makes
seatbelts?
it okay to
No.
be reckless?
Okay. Mr. Anderson, isn't it true that you were disappointed when you weren't invited back after 1977 by the Menendez family to visit during the summer vacations?
You could say yes, I was disappointed.
In fact, you were unhappy about that, weren't you?
Not fully after after things were explained to me as to what was going on. They were in the process of moving. The boys were getting more involved in sports. There was no time for them to actually have any freedom for me to be there.
So, in fact, you were so upset about it that you wanted an explanation why you couldn't come back to the Menendez house and visit with them summers subsequent to 1977, correct?
Objection argument.
Overruled.
I don't remember. You have to ask me who's talking with me. I don't understand who's trying to. I don't understand who I'm talking to at this point.
The witness.
Is it with my
Yeah.
father? Is it with Kitty? Is it with?
Let me direct your attention to
Fair
your
question.
interview with the defense attorneys on April 27th, 1992. The second page. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to show you a report, an interview with yourself with the defense attorneys, Leslie Andersen and Jill Lansing. This occurred on April 27th, 1992 in Oak Lawn, correct? If you would read the highlighted portion.
Your objection is what?
My objection is that what's being shown to the witness is not impeachment.
Objection overruled. At this point, it's just being shown to the witness. You may look at it. Just read it to yourself.
Mr. Andersen, does that refresh your present recollection as to what occurred after your visits to the Menendez home in 1977?
I can remember sitting at the kitchen table with my father and talking about why I was going back. And that was his explanation for him talking with Kitty.
Does the report indicate that
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is conclusion by the witness.
All right, you're asking for you're objecting to the answer as a conclusion?
Yes.
All right, the objection is sustained, the answer is stricken. Your next question, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Andersen, did you ever communicate to Kitty Menendez that you were unhappy about not being asked for the summer to spend the summer with the Menendez household?
On the phone,
You spoke to Kitty Menendez?
after my father called her.
Okay. And you indicated that you were unhappy that you weren't invited back?
Yes. It was a very brief conversation. I remember it.
I mean, so after these 3 times that you went for these summer vacations, you wanted to go back.
I wanted to go back and be with my cousins.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
That cross-examination was ineffective in my opinion. It has not done anything to poke any holes in what he has.
Mr. Andersen, you were asked
Otherwise
if you
told.
had seen any sexual abuse while you were living in the house. Is that correct? Remember being asked that by the
Yes.
prosecution? And your answer was you were not allowed in the room. What did you mean by that?
Important point to emphasize.
As soon as Jose took either one of the boys into their room, the door was locked behind him. And Kitty made it very clear that she did not go down the hallway to listen or go near that door. So we were not allowed in or near the room.
And would Kitty
So
walk
she
in and
also
out of that
really knew
room?
what was happening.
No, Kitty was not even allowed in the room.
God.
And you made some reference to you thought that the situation with showers was a little unusual.
I found it to be very unusual, being the age that Lyle was, he could shower himself.
Yeah.
And Erik being the age that he
100%.
was, I've seen him numerous times go into the bathroom and take baths or showers by himself. After tennis matches, we would come home. Jose and the 2 boys would go into the shower in their room,
In whose room?
in the parents' room.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Was this a family?
And good pacing by the attorney here by just letting that sit there in the courtroom. You know, like there is no rushing over this point. There is no like, you know, just like powering through different points. Like that is hanging there in the air in this moment in the courtroom. So the jury is left to just visualize it, which is just awful, 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 but powerful for the defense, very effective for the defense. And this witness is so good at testifying because even though he's unfamiliar with the process, you know, he showed that very early on, he's unfamiliar with the process of speaking in trials. You know, he's uncomfortable with you know, having to wait until the question is fully answered before before it's fully asked before he can give his answer. Like there's so much here that is unfamiliar to him. But sometimes when you have someone that is a very sympathetic witness to one particular side, they'll want to like overdo it with their testimony. You can kind of get this feeling after a while that they're really trying to sell their story, right? Like they're really trying to I don't know, it's like they're a little bit too active in their testimony. We saw this as an example in the Gwyneth Paltrow trial where one of the plaintiff's witnesses, you know, the one who was colorblind, who said that he as it turns out, couldn't tell the difference between Gwyneth Paltrow's outfit and the plaintiff's outfit. I'm totally Terry something is his name. I'm forgetting it, but regardless, like after a while, like we started to feel like he was really, really trying to get a little bit bendy with the facts to help the party that he was there to testify on behalf. That's not happening here. Like we are getting a very straightforward Andersen. Thank you, Ellen, not Sarah Lee in the chat. So that's not happening here. Like he is giving a very straightforward testimony. He is just, you can tell that he feels very uncomfortable with sitting with the things that he's had to sit with for his whole life, being a part of this extended family and being there for a lot of these events as they have unfolded. And so he doesn't come across as somebody who's trying to sell a particular narrative and like trying to negotiate through certain hoops, to try to impart all of this on the jury. No, he's uncomfortable. He's not familiar with this process. And he's just telling the history like it is. That's the impression that I have of this particular witness. So yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Family in which there was a lot of warmth displayed.
Oh, God, no,
Was there hugging?
no,
Were there pet names or gentle voices used?
no.
You were asked about the incident in which Kitty was throwing the dishes into the sink. You described the clutching of the fists, and do you remember that? All the
Yes.
behavior that went with it. Was she a small woman or
No. Oh, no, she was very physically fit.
was she strong?
Yes, very strong.
You were asked about the punishment that you received, and you indicated you were never hit with a belt. You were sent to your room. Is that correct?
Yes, I was verbally yelled at and then sent to my room with the door locked behind me.
Now, when you were verbally yelled at, were you told that your behavior was bad or that there was something wrong with you?
I was very much belittled to the fact that because of the neighborhood I came from was that it'd be the cause for the fact of how I was.
Did you come from a very dangerous neighborhood?
Very rough neighborhood, yes. Very lower middle class. Well, the area that we lived in, but the area that I hung around in was lower middle class, upper lower class.
And so they were condemning you because of your exposure to people who were lower middle class?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Excuse me. Among the punishments, were you ever sent to do projects as a form of punishment?
Yes.
And was there an incident in particular that stands out in your mind?
The pond in the backyard.
Now, what was the pond in the backyard? Can you describe it for me?
The pond was off to the side of the house, and it was a concrete pond, shallow pond, that was, the rocks were in the pond. The rocks throughout, they bought the house with the rocks in the pond. Never did anything with it. And he had sent me out there to remove all the rocks from the pond, which took me days to do.
If you'll stop a minute, let me show you a photograph. Your Honor, I'd like to mark this as next in order.
157.
Thank you. May I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, showing you what we've marked as 157, does that appear to be the pond you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so Jose sent you out there to take the rocks out of the pond?
Yes.
And
No, he didn't send me. He told me I was going out there to do that.
how long did it take you to get all the rocks out of the pond?
It took me about 3 days.
After you got the rocks out of the pond, what did you do next?
I proceeded to scrub the pond and fill it with water.
And what happened after you filled it with water?
I was told to take the water out of the pond with a gallon bucket.
Oh my
And how
God.
long did that take you?
It took me about 2 days to do all that
And why were you told to take the water out of the pond?
because Jose wanted to paint it.
After you took the water out of the pond, did he ever paint it?
No, he lost interest in the project.
The district attorney asked you if there was a difference between when you went to the Cedar Grove house and when you went to the Muncie house in 1977. Is there a difference in what that family was like? Is that a confusing question? May I rephrase it, Your Honor?
Sure.
You indicated that in 1975, I'm sorry, when you went to the Cedar Grove house in which they lived in 1969 and 1970, that it was a happy home.
Yes, it very much appeared to be that way.
Okay. Was it different in 1977?
Very much. The atmosphere in the family was extremely tense.
Objection.
All right, your next question.
The district attorney asked you about your use of the word malicious.
Yes, he did.
And in talking about malicious, you talked about cutting the flowers off of the plants. Is that correct?
Leaving the stems, yes.
And is that your definition of malicious behavior?
No, should have been. I should have stated mischievous. I instead of saying malicious.
Was there anything about the eye injury that Lyle sustained that upset the parents with regard to his ability to play tennis?
Oh, they were very concerned that he would not be able to
Overall.
They were very concerned that Lyle would not be able to see correctly out of that eye, and would very much be detrimental to the fact that he would not be able to professionally play tennis, having that impairment. And that I just totally ruined his career as a tennis if his eye would not heal properly. And all the time and money that they spent grooming him in tennis was all for what? For naught, if his eye would not be correctly,
He's used the word grooming a couple times, and he doesn't intend it the way that it's typically used today. We hear this a lot, having to do with minors, although there's a lot going on here that, would have been also fitting within the modern usage of the term. But we could all get what he means by that, but it's interesting to see the application of the word in a slightly different context than the way that we would use it today.
if his vision was not correctly responded after it healed.
You were asked about Jose paying for tennis lessons for you. Was this an extended program, or how many tennis lessons did you take?
Not very many at all. The only reason why that it all happened was that they would not leave me home alone to go. They wanted me, because I was there, to be with my cousins. The main purpose of the trip was for me to go there to be with my cousins. And so in order for me to be with my cousins, which then he already had paid for this training for them, he paid for training for myself so that I could be, which then I never was with them when I got there. I was put in a general group.
Okay. Was there some difference in the lessons that were provided for the boys and the lessons that you received?
Oh, very much so. Like I stated earlier, I was put in a very general group away from the boys. And the boys had a private trainer.
And was your coach given any particular instructions in terms of how hard he should work with you?
Nah, it was, hey, he's here, just keep him busy, pretty much. Because I wasn't going to be there for the whole summer. So there was no sense in him getting into depth with me, because it was going to be, I was just there. That was the main reason for it.
So would it be fair to say that they had a particular objective in mind with regard to the boys, but no purpose, no similar purpose?
No, they made it clear there was no purpose. I was just there because, number one, they didn't want to leave me home alone, me being a new person to the neighborhood and so on and so forth. And also that I could be with the boys, but and what it came out to be was I never was with them. I was in the same building as the boys, but never with the boys, never interacting with them.
Okay. And Mr. Kuriyama asked you if when you were punished, it was because you misbehaved. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were these...
That's a hard question, by the way, because arguably he was abused by Jose Menendez as well, not in the same way or maybe to the same level as the brothers. But when someone has suffered through years of abuse, oftentimes it's hard for them to separate their own actions from the abuse. And so oftentimes people will feel like they got the abuse because that's because of something that they did, that they deserved it somehow. They misbehaved somehow, because that's oftentimes communications that the abuser will give when they are abusing. And so it's hard to ask someone like that, like this, be like, you got punished because you were misbehaving, right? When, you know, with therapy, they can look back on that and be like, no, I was not misbehaving. I was being abused. But if they haven't gone through that process, they might still have in their mind, well, yeah, I was misbehaving. So it's a tricky question to be asking someone like this in this kind of a situation.
Major acts of misbehavior, or would they sometimes be very minor things?
It could have been anything. Jose did not tolerate any mischievous acts at all.
You were asked about Jose spending time teaching the boys to box. Did he encourage the boys to fight with each other?
Yes, he did.
And did he encourage Lyle to fight with you?
Yes, he did.
And what was you were significantly older?
I was significantly bigger also, yes. I had to go to my knees. I could not stand up. I had to be on my knees.
And Erik was significantly younger even than Lyle.
Yes.
What was this formalized boxing training, or was this fighting?
It was, we were given small pillows to clutch in our hands. And then that's what we would box with.
And would he watch you and give instructions to you as you were boxing?
Yes, he would tell us how to hit, where to hit, how hard to hit, and then we would take it from there.
Would he tell
This sounds like Hunger Games, like growing up in the Hunger Games.
you to hit hard?
Yes, at times.
What was the purpose?
I would not. I would not. I would always hold back. It was one of the things that Jose just didn't like about me, is that I wouldn't compete to that level with them.
What was the purpose of this fighting? Were they gonna,
Self-defense.
did they have to learn to be tough?
Yes. Accept pain.
So by the way, I totally meant to bring this up earlier. The chubby one. I'm so sorry. I totally butchered your name. Thank you so much for the super chat. Asking, can your boss give you a PPI for yawning during a Zoom meeting? I think you mean a performance improvement plan. So I can't give legal advice, partly because I don't know where you are, but also I generally don't give legal advice on the channel, through the channel, on live streams or anything. I will say, with that said, generally speaking, in most jurisdictions, most people are going to be employees at will, meaning that there's no contract, there's nothing. In which case, generally speaking, here's the thing that employment attorneys will usually say. I used to say this all the time to clients and potential clients. You can be fired for anything or nothing at all, so long as it's not an illegal reason. And what I mean by that is, an illegal reason would be, where somebody has blown a whistle on some sort of illegal activity and then therefore got retaliated against. Someone is they were fired, or they suspect that they were fired because of racism, sexism, religious reasons, disability. You have asked for something that you are legally entitled to, and then they turned around and fired you. Pregnancy is one of those things that can come up. So there are reasons like that. For yawning, I would like to know if the yawning had something to do with a known disability, as an example. That would be an important piece of information for that. But generally speaking, otherwise, if it's not connected to something like that, my guess would be that would probably fall under the umbrella of you can get fired for anything or nothing at all. Even if it seems like a silly reason, it's unfortunately not illegal for a boss to be an a-hole to you. So I again, not legal advice. I don't know the other factors, the other circumstances in that are related to why you're asking. So yeah, as Ellen, not Sarah Lee, says in the chat, if yawning would get you fired, we would have fired Legalbytes a long time ago. I know, because I do that all the time. Part of it is because of like the hour that I stream at sometimes, and then also I think it's also just because of I don't know, maybe I don't know how to breathe when I'm talking for periods of time. I'm not sure. But anyway, and when you see the word yawn, it makes you yawn sometimes. Like right now, I'm fired. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Christian Williams also, what question would you ask on cross? Just curious. For this, I mean, this is tough. Like I said, this is a tough witness to cross-examine. What I would do is I would really focus in on trying to limit his memory, and trying to limit his perception. That's really where I would focus. Not asking about like, were you malicious? Were they malicious? Like things like that that are just not going to like it's just not going to really get you anywhere. But what's more effective is asking questions to say like, hey, I mean, he kind of got there in some instances where he's like, you weren't in the room where it happened, to quote Hamilton, like you weren't there. You didn't actually see any abuse yourself, but then asking more like tailored questions, like how far away were you? Like how big was this space? How, like what could someone reasonably have heard? Did you ever, like, I would want to know, like, was there, screaming and shouting in other instances that weren't abusive? I don't know that would necessarily come in, like that would be something that is factual that anyone would testify to, but I would want to know about that kind of stuff. How often was he actually there? Was he really, because I have the impression that he was there all the time, but I don't remember hearing just how often he would be there. For how many years did this span? How, when he was there for summers, how long in the summer was it? Maybe the snippets of time that he saw were just a very small sliver. And most of the time things were actually pretty good, that he just happened to see, like maybe focusing in on the happy times, like specifically focusing in on very specific incidents or specific memories that he has that were good. I don't know. That's how I would try to go about it, is being very focused on that, on perception issues and on memory issues. Like, these things happened a long time ago, bringing up how maybe he doesn't remember these things as well as he has made an impression that he has. Okay. And also off topic, but will you be doing other classic trials in the future? This is such a long trial. But probably, I mean, I've intended to do other trials as well. I've had some people asking about the O.J. Simpson trial. That one is even longer than this one. So I would probably want to do like a shorter one after this, in between, just to get more trials under our belt together. So, okay. Anyway, let's continue with
accept pain.
Accept pain. When you were asked about the reckless driving, you said there were no car seats. No seatbelts. Did Lyle have a car seat?
No, well, we got what instance? What are you talking?
We're talking about the Jaguar incident.
No, he was on my lap.
And this is in Cedar Grove.
Yes.
And this is when he's about 2 years old.
Yes.
You said you were not invited back because there was no time for freedom. Was the Menendez house a place where the neighborhood kids gathered and came inside and played and there was
Probably not.
unstructured play?
Never,
Did you ever see neighborhood kids inside the house?
never.
Did the boys have free time for unstructured play?
Only when I was able to get them off the yard without Kitty knowing about it. Or if I went to Kitty
They
when
had to
Jose
sneak
was
out.
at home, I said, can Lyle please come over? And it was a neighbor boy that I happened to befriend. Now, I was allowed to leave the property, to go to the neighbor boy's house. But I was the only person. I had to ask Kitty for permission to take Lyle, but not allowed to take Erik with. Erik was never allowed to leave the property.
And I think you described for the prosecution, Erik holding on to his mother's leg and her patting him on the head. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever see her do anything more than that in terms of gestures of affection?
No, both her or Jose did not show affection. They did not hug, did not say, I love you,
That's
did
horrible.
not, any of the things that I was used to. No.
Which, I mean, look, I'm not a mother. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, some of whom I have helped in at various points in time to raise, and I don't understand how you don't do that with your own kids, how you don't hug them, how you don't give them affection, how you don't show them and tell them that you love them. It's, I mean, in the context of this, it's not surprising based on what we've heard about Kitty and Jose Menendez, but it's just I don't see how someone can do that. It's just too crazy. What are you doing? She's like too tired to kick the pillow off the chair. But like there you go. You get it. There you go. Okay. That's a good girl. Good girl, Indy Bear. Okay.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Andersen, did you love your Aunt Kitty?
Yes.
And when we first came to see you in Oak Lawn, Illinois, in when was it, April of
27, 26.
92, you had never met me or Miss Lansing before.
No.
And do you feel loyal to your family?
To my immediate family, I
Yeah.
feel loyal to my wife and my children.
Well, you feel loyal to your wife and children, do you not?
Yes.
And did you feel, over the course of growing up, did you feel that a person should be loyal to their family as well?
As any kid would think, yes.
Okay. And did you feel badly when your Aunt Kitty died?
Extremely bad.
That sigh that he gave before answering, though, that sigh before, it was just, you could hear with that exhale, just the, oh, that's such a loaded question. Loyalty to my family. How do you, I mean, he must have been thinking like, how do you classify family? How do you define family? How am I continuing to define family from my point of view, moving forward? Obviously, he has his wife and his children. That is a family that he has chosen to create and to foster, which is very different than the family that you were born with. And, so this idea of loyalty to your family is like such a hard thing for someone like that to answer, I would imagine. And you could just hear all of that with that exhale before he answered.
And did you like your cousins, Erik and Lyle?
I love my cousins, Erik and Lyle.
And did you find it hard to believe when we discussed it with you that Erik and Lyle had killed their parents?
I find them
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Now, since we interviewed you in April, have you spent a fair amount of time thinking about those days that you spent in your Aunt Kitty's house?
yes.
And have details and memories come to you since that first day that we talked to you?
I guess.
Okay. I wanted to ask you this. Ms. Lansing just asked you about Aunt Kitty's driving. Was she always a fast and reckless driver?
She was always in a hurry to get nowhere.
Okay. Was she always late in getting nowhere as well?
Always. Always.
But the things that stood out in your mind are these episodes when she would purposely go out joyriding, she called it?
Objection, leading from state savings.
Objection sustained.
Does it stand out in your mind that on occasion she would announce that she wanted to take a joyride?
That when I stated that, that was the only time I remember saying that word joyride. Other times she would say, let's go for a ride.
For a ride. And would these be particularly reckless?
Oh, they would, yes.
Okay. Now, I just want to go over these words that were read to you by Mr. Kuriyama when you were describing the boys. And you said this was things that you observed during the 1977 visit, okay? You said the boys were hyper. Now, first, I'd like you to distinguish, if you can, between Erik and Lyle, okay? But very first, what did you mean by hyper?
Very excitable, happy to see me, extremely happy to see me.
I'm sure.
Just in general, they were extremely happy to see me. I just consider that hyper. They were real up, just real happy.
Okay. Well, sometimes people use the word hyper like hyperactive. Is that what you meant?
No.
Okay. Did they have difficulty sitting still?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did they need to move a lot and be physically active?
Yes.
When their father was around, and he wanted them to sit still, did they sit still?
They sat still.
In fact, when their father was around, if you ordered them to do something, did they do it?
Myself?
Did they do it?
When I asked them to do something?
No. When Jose was around, if he ordered the boys to do something, did they do it?
Beyond scope.
I'm sorry?
Beyond scope.
Objection overruled.
Oh, yes. They, as soon as their father snapped his fingers and gave them a direct, they went off to do it.
So they were very obedient to his commands, were they?
Oh,
not?
very, very obedient.
Now, the next thing you said was that the boys were looking for attention. Was that both boys?
More so Lyle than Erik.
And was Lyle looking for attention from whom?
Myself.
Okay. So Lyle would come to you and interact with you more than Erik.
Yes.
Now, the next thing you said was that they were highly emotional. Were they both highly emotional?
Erik, 99% more than Lyle.
Was Erik a crybaby?
To the true word of crybaby,
Did he cry and whine a
he
lot?
cried and whined a lot.
Did he kind of annoy you because he was a crying, whiny baby?
That's
At
an interesting
times.
reaction.
Did you ever hear
was a
his father
smile.
call him sissy?
He called, not exactly the word sissy. He called him baby.
When he would be upset or crying or whining?
He could, yes.
Now, you also used the word vindictive. What did you mean by that? How is a 6.5-year-old, for example, vindictive?
To me, the way I used that was in Lyle had a temper. I have a temper. So I was able to relate to Lyle in that aspect. I use that word because when I would get mad, I would like when I cut the flowers off. I was upset with something, and so I cut the flowers off.
And would Lyle, when he would get upset and mad, also do things like that?
Well, he'd go outside and beat up a tree or beat up a log or something in the yard. He'd tear his doll apart. Do stuff like that.
So when he was angry, he would react in some way.
At an inanimate object, yes.
At an inanimate object. And that's what you meant by that word.
Yes.
You didn't apply that word to Erik?
Erik would just cry, or he would go off in a corner and just be by himself.
Okay. Now, when you said that they were angry, was this being applied to both of them?
More so Lyle than Erik.
And would Lyle tend to be angry after the parents had done something to him or said
Extremely.
something to him? Was that when he'd seem angry?
Yes.
And concerning their being destructive of property, was that true of both of them?
More so Lyle. But yes, both, yes.
Okay. Would they break things a lot?
In playing with them, yes. And in cases of just, yeah, okay, yes.
Now, this fighting that Jose encouraged them to engage in, did they get hurt?
We used to swing pretty hard. You can say we used to make each other cry.
Would Erik get hurt, for example, if Lyle was fighting with him?
Yeah, they would. The competitiveness would get over extreme.
Well, Jose was encouraging this, wasn't he?
Exactly.
And if Lyle was hurting his little brother, Jose didn't stop it, did he?
No.
In fact, if you were inadvertently...
Counsel, let's not lead the witness.
Okay, if you were hurting one of the boys, you who are so much older, in front of Jose in this encouragement, would Jose stop you?
Jose would not stop me. He would instruct the boys how to deflect the punch or how to take the punch.
Did you ever hear Jose telling either of the boys to attack the other boy from behind or catch him unaware or
The element of
fight dirty?
Yes, the element of surprise was a factor. Such as if you were to throw your arm out this way from the view of the arm, you led with the right.
So he was trying to teach them how to fake out opponents?
Exactly.
Did you ever hear him encourage Erik, for example, to hit Lyle in the back?
In the back and below the belt.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in the back and.
Or below the belt.
Because those are vulnerable areas, the kidney, the back, lower back on both either side or the groin area. Those are vulnerable areas to a male.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have nothing further.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
See how effective this recross is.
Mr. Anderson, with respect to the last time that you were at the Menendez house and you were on your knees because you were so much bigger than the brothers and you had these pillows on your hand, the brothers were what, about 6 and 9 years old?
Yes, 77.
You were how old?
I was 12.
Okay.
I was 12, wasn't I? I'm trying to get my bearing here. 70. You got it. I'm not good with ages and when. I'm sorry. I will admit that.
1977.
Okay.
You were quite a bit older than both Erik and Lyle.
Oh yes, yes.
Okay, so if they were 6 and 9 during that year.
I'd be 16, 15, 16 years old.
Now you had indicated that you were so much bigger than even the older brother Lyle that you had to get on your knees to have these pillows on your hands.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all had pillows.
Spar. Okay. Now, when they were little boys, you were saying that after tennis, they would go and shower with their father, correct?
Correct.
Would the father ask you as a 16-year-old, almost a man, would he ask you to come on in and shower with him?
No.
Okay. Now, at some point later, in fact, first of all, it was 12 years before the murders that you spent time at the Menendez family household,
I'm going
correct?
to object to counsel referring to the killings as murders.
All right, why don't you rephrase the question? It's ambiguous as to what
Yeah.
you're referring to anyway.
You're not
Mr.
right.
Anderson, you indicated that it was 1977 that you visited on an extended visit with the Menendez family, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was 12 years later that the killings occurred, correct?
Yes.
So it's been 12 years since you had even spent an extended period of time with the family. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, after the defendants became adults, did you see them very often?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope.
Overall,
The adults, as far as after high school,
Yes.
the boys were both in college and very active, traveling around the country doing tennis. So no, unless I have my own life. So no, I was married at the time.
In fact, when the killings occurred, Lyle was 21 and Erik was almost 19 years old, correct?
Yes.
Now, you had indicated that when you get upset, that you cut off flowers off the plants, correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the former questions. Argumentative.
overall,
You can answer, Mr. Anderson.
That when I got upset,
Right, you were saying when you get upset, you you, for example, cut off the flowers off of plants?
Object to the form of the question, it doesn't say that's.
Overall,
Yes.
overall.
You may
I
answer that.
did cut the flowers off the plants.
And in
heads.
redirect examination, you said that when Lyle would get upset, he would go up and beat up a tree, an inanimate object, correct?
Correct.
And when Kitty Menendez would get upset, she would get mad at an inanimate dish and throw it in a sink, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Final question is, you've indicated that Kitty Menendez was this big, strong lady, correct?
Not immensely big, but she was a fit woman.
She was 5'5", correct?
I don't know what her exact height was.
I mean,
You're a 9-year-old. that's
looking at
already
her
big.
as you sit there, were you afraid of her?
Afraid of Kitty?
Yes.
Objection is to win.
Why don't you clarify that?
You've indicated on redirect examination that Kitty was this big, strong woman. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Isn't it true that she was 5'5"?
Objection, you're argumentative.
Overall,
He asked and answered, he's already said he didn't know.
overall.
You can answer.
I don't know how tall she was.
Was she as big as you, sir?
No, she was a little bigger.
She was bigger than you.
Shoulder wise,
Someone
yes.
can be
At the time.
little
Height
and
size.
still be very abusive.
No, I was taller.
How tall are you, sir?
I'm 6'2".
Were you over a head taller than Kitty Menendez?
At the time, I was not 6'2". Right now, I'm 6'2".
Yeah.
You've indicated in redirect examination that she was a large, strong woman. Is that right?
That's how I pictured her, as a very fit, strong woman.
Okay. Isn't it true when you said you saw her 10 days before the killings? Would that have been August 10th of 1989?
Mm-hmm.
Was she this big, strong, monstrous woman to you then?
Object to the form of the question, Your Honor. It's argumentative.
Rephrase the question, please.
Yeah.
Okay, Your Honor. When you saw her on that last occasion that you actually saw her, on or about the 10th of August, did she look like this big, strong woman to you? This is 10 days before the killings.
No,
Okay,
but
thank you.
I don't think the witness.
Okay.
All right, he did. Objection
redirect.
is overall. Anything else?
Another redirect.
I just have one additional question.
Yes.
Your Honor.
Yeah. Land on this question of why he was afraid of Kitty.
Mr. Anderson, you were asked if you saw the boys again after 1977. Did you see them at a funeral after 1977?
right, yes, my grandmother Andersen's funeral.
And was that 1984?
Yes.
And can you describe for me the behavior of the boys at that funeral?
Oh, it seemed like a circus. It was. I was flabbergasted at how they were. They came in, said hi to all the relatives in a respectful manner, and then were consoled by Jose. The three of them went off and sat on a couch. And then after all was said and done, Jose went and started talking with the other adults in the area, and the boys became very quiet and didn't seem to want to talk as when they first came in. And I
Ask another question.
So they come in together and he sits down, Jose sits down on the couch with them and has a talk with them?
yes,
And after that, do the boys remain on the couch?
no,
What do they do?
they're walking around, but they are more together.
Together, meaning Erik and Lyle were together.
Yes,
Were they interacting with people?
people were coming to them, talking, but they were not. I did not see them willfully going to a lot of people. No.
Did their behavior seem different than other people? Was there something unusual about the way they were acting?
Objection calls for conclusion, Your Honor.
Overall,
They came in as if a person came in from a
that's
wealthy.
not the question.
Was there something unusual about their behavior?
If you give me time to rethink back to the day. You know, if they walked in with heads high
The question was there anything unusual about their behavior? You can say yes
after
or no.
talking with, yes,
Okay, what was unusual after they had the conversation with their father?
their heads were not hung as high as when they first walked in the door.
Did they look sad, angry, happy?
They seemed very displeased with the conversation they had with their father.
And did he appear to still be exercising the kind of control over him that?
Very much so, very much so.
And the only other area I want to ask, you were asked if Kitty seemed big, seemed strong to you. Were you afraid of her when she got mad?
I was very respectful of her.
What about when she went into this clenching the fist and gritting the teeth?
Yes.
Was that frightening?
Yes, then I was afraid of her.
And this was at 16?
Yes.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. You're excused. Let me see counsel at the sidebar, please, regarding our schedule. And at this point, we'll take our recess until tomorrow at 10 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, not 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The lawyers and I will be meeting at 9 o'clock to deal with some matters that will relate to the next several witnesses. So when we do that, there's no need to have you here before 10. So
Okay.
I'd ask that each jury return tomorrow at 10 to your respective.
Okay, so we don't need the rest of that. Oh, what a day. I mean, that was some tough testimony to get through. It was really engaging. I mean, I would be very surprised if there was anyone in that room that was having a hard time paying attention to what was being said. I see Shireen in the chat. That was a long witness. I agree. That was a long witness, but I mean, not a boring one. So that was tough. It was tough to get through, not because of the length of that testimony, but because of the details that that he had to give. That was really, really difficult. I think the defense did a great job with this. I think that cross-examination was ultimately basically ineffective. And I don't know that that's entirely to blame for the attorneys, you know, like that's like blame that you can put at the attorneys, the prosecution's feet, because this is a tough witness to cross-examine, in my opinion. I think that there are some things that I would have done differently, but I mean, I'm not the one that's, you know, in the courtroom on the floor, you know, trying to try a case, right? I'm here sitting very comfortably on YouTube in the box and giving my opinions. But that's a tough witness to cross-examine. He's a very sympathetic witness. He comes across very sympathetically, very sincere, very credibly. And he's testified to some very garish things. I mean, just horrible, horrible, dark things. I feel like I'm pretty convinced at this point that Jose Menendez was a monster, as was Kitty. Because, you know, while she may not have been the one doing the actual abusing, she absolutely seemed to have known that it was happening, and she facilitated it to happen, which is just as bad as actually committing the abuse itself. And to see it's horrifying to see that as parents, doing that to their own children, you know, a father or a mother. Like, I'm thinking of it from a mother's perspective, because that's like, you know, I hope to be a mother at some point, but, you know, a father too. That's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. Like, this is against nature, right? Like, this is not something that we would ever want to see existing. It's not normal. It's not the natural way of things happening. And so to see this play out in such detail is horrifying. But I think that the defense did a very good job of laying this one out, because it's hard. It's hard to say, yeah, these guys should rot away in prison forever. Hearing that. Now, that's not to say that I am at this point siding with the with the defense on this, because I still am thinking about, you know, self-defense. Does this really fit into the definition of self-defense? I don't know. I'm going to want to hear more details. I suspect that the testimony of Erik and Lyle will really help to shape that, because they will be giving their their impressions, their thought processes, their conversations in, talking about the days up to that happening, the hours up to, when they shot their parents. But yeah, this is a hard case. This is a hard case. These kind of cases are hard, where you have somebody that has been abused for a very long time, where the victim doesn't seem like a victim at all because of the things that they've done. Both of them at this point. Like for a while, I was like, okay, Jose, yeah, he was abusing them. That seemed pretty clear to me before this testimony. But I wasn't so sure about Kitty and her role in it. And it seemed like the prosecution's explanation of like, oh, they did away with her because she happened to be there and she would have, testified to bring them to, I don't know, something along those lines. Like the prosecution's explanation on that seemed like maybe it was reasonable, but at this point, I think she was abused herself by Jose, but I think that she in turn was also very much abusing the boys. Man. And she herself was abusing them as well. I mean, that psychological abuse of the cousin of Brian Jr. here. I mean, God, by purposely not punishing him or just sending him to his room, and then telling Jose that it was all Lyle's fault, that Lyle did the things that Brian Jr. had done. It's crazy because she knew that he would know that Lyle was being abused for something that Lyle himself didn't do and that Brian had done. That's some psychological torture right there. Okay. Anyway, so like I said, this was tough to get through. And I'm gonna do this since Indy's out of the room. This was tough to get through. So thank you for joining me in this. This was a lot. And if this is hanging heavily on your heart, I know that there are a lot of very kind and empathetic people in this chat. I mean, I see it in the conversations that you guys are having. A lot of people are reminded of their own things that they've been through. If you are walking away from this, with these kind of streams, I always want to try to end on something positive, right? If you feel like this is just hanging on your heart a little bit too heavily, go outside, get some fresh air. It's warm enough to have some bare feet on grass. Like that is helpful. If you feel like the world is a little bit darker because of experiencing this, try to do one good thing to regain a sense of control. It can be helpful to do this. Try to do one good thing for one other person, especially for someone without expecting anything in return, most ideally for someone who can't do anything in return, right? Whether it's a human being or an animal or what have you, something just to kind of like rebalance the universe a little bit, make things just a little bit brighter for the rest of the world. And at the end of the day, it'll at the very least should help you a little bit in feeling like things are going to be okay. So anyway, with that, thank you so much to everyone for hanging out with me. And thank you for all of the great engagement in the chat. Thank you to the mods who are helping to facilitate and move that forward in a good, productive way. It can be tricky with streams like this, with the conversations that we're having, but you guys always manage to do it in such a kind and thoughtful and understanding way of other people in the chat. And it's one of the things that I love most about these streams. So, okay. Next week, we will be hearing from another cousin at the very least one. So Kathleen Simonton is on deck to testify next, who is another one of the Menendez cousins. So get ready for more crazy Menendez family testimony. But until then, if you are a member of Bite Club, I hopefully will see you on Friday for our members only live stream. And otherwise, I've got another upload in the works, and hopefully I will have that to you guys within the next couple days. Stay tuned for all of that. And otherwise, I think that's about it. I'll see you guys in the next video.